Welcome back to another story on Half-Blood Harry. This time, we're bringing you, Poseidon found Harry drowning at Dursley's age 7 and claimed him as Percy's missing twin brother. Your likes fuel our creativity. Subscribe and stay tuned. Here's the story. Chapter 1, The Drowning Boy. The water was the only place Vernon Dursley's hands couldn't reach him. That was what Harry had learned by age 5, when the bathtub became the one room in number 4, Privet Drive, where he could lock the door without getting screamed at. Vernon didn't like getting his shirt wet. Petunia didn't like the sound of splashing. So Harry would fill the tub as high as it would go, sink down until the water covered his ears, and listen to the silence underneath. It wasn't silence, exactly. It was something better. A kind of low, breathing hum, like the water was alive, like it had something to say if he just went still enough to hear it. Sometimes he'd open his eyes under the surface and stare up at the wobbly ceiling through 3 inches of bath water and think, this is what the world looks like from the bottom of the ocean. He didn't know why that thought made him feel less alone. He'd never seen the ocean. He'd never been anywhere. He was 7 years old, and the world was number 4, and number 4 was very small. Tonight, Dudley had broken his arm. Not Harry's arm, Dudley's. Harry hadn't even touched him, which was the part nobody believed. Dudley had been chasing Harry around the garden with a cricket bat, as Dudley did, and Harry had tripped and gone down hard on the grass, and when he'd looked up at Dudley looming over him with the bat raised, something had happened. The air had gone strange. The garden hose, coiled by the fence 20 feet away, had uncoiled itself very fast and very deliberately and wrapped around Dudley's ankles, and Dudley had gone over like a felled tree and snapped his wrist against the patio. The screaming had lasted 2 hours. The ambulance had come. Vernon had spent those 2 hours explaining to Harry, in very small words and a very red face, exactly what was going to happen when he got back from the hospital. So Harry was in the bathtub. It was nearly midnight. The house was quiet. He'd filled the tub high, higher than usual, because he needed the weight of the water around him tonight. He needed the hum. He sank down slowly until only his nose cleared the surface. The hum was different tonight. Louder. Closer. Like it was coming from inside the water rather than somewhere beneath it, like the pipes in the walls had connected to something vast and moving and dark. Harry felt it in his sternum, that low vibration, and without really deciding to, he let himself sink the rest of the way down. His eyes opened under the water. He'd done this 100 times. He knew what the ceiling looked like through 3 inches of bath water, knew the way the weak bulb overhead scattered into something almost beautiful when refracted through the surface. He knew this. But tonight the water didn't look like bath water. It looked deep. It looked like it went somewhere. Harry stayed very still, lungs not yet burning, and stared. The hum resolved into something that wasn't quite a sound. It was more like a pressure, like someone standing very close behind you in a dark room, like the moment before lightning when the air changes and every hair on your arm stands up. Harry felt it press against his chest, gentle and immense, the way he imagined the deep ocean might press against a submarine, not violent, just present. Just vast. Then his lungs started burning, and he pushed up toward the surface, and something pushed back. Not hard. Not like a hand. More like the way a current grabs you in a river, impersonal, enormous, and completely disinterested in what you want. The water thickened around him, or he slowed down, or both. Harry's hands hit the bottom of the tub. His feet left the bottom of the tub. He was horizontal and the ceiling was above him and the water between them seemed to have gotten much, much deeper than 3 inches. His lungs were screaming now. He kicked. He clawed at the porcelain. The water didn't let go. It wasn't malicious, that was the strange part, the part that would stay with him long after everything else faded. It wasn't trying to hurt him. It felt almost like an embrace. Like something enormous had finally found what it was looking for and didn't know yet how to be gentle about holding it. Harry opened his mouth and breathed in water and felt nothing. That was the second strange part. The water filled his lungs and he expected pain, expected the horrible drowning sensation he'd read about in Dudley's discarded school books, but instead there was just more hum. Deeper. The vibration filling him from the inside now, his whole chest resonating with it, and through the blur of the water and the wobble of the light bulb he saw the bathroom ceiling ripple and shift and become something else entirely. Stars. Dark water. A depth so absolute and blue-black it made the universe look shallow. Then a hand closed around his wrist. Not a current this time. A hand, large, certain, with the kind of grip that has never once in its existence had to prove itself. It pulled him up through the bathwater like the distance was nothing, and Harry broke the surface gasping, slamming back into the reality of a small yellow bathroom in Surrey, England, and the overhead bulb was just a bulb again, and the water was just water, and crouched beside the bathtub with one arm reaching in was a man who should not have been able to fit in the room. Harry stared at him. He was large, not in the Dursley way, where large meant soft and mean and taking up space that belonged to someone else. Large in the way of things that were built for purpose. Broad through the shoulder, dark-haired, with a short beard that had gone silver at the jaw. He wore something that wasn't quite modern clothing, a dark coat that moved wrong, like it had water in the fabric. His eyes were deep-set and a color Harry had no word for, something between gray and green and the shade of the sea in winter, and they were looking at Harry with an expression that Harry had also never had a word for because nobody had ever aimed it at him before. Recognition. The helpless, fractured kind. The kind that cracked something open. "There you are," the man said. His voice was low, the way thunder is low when it's far away but coming closer. He said it like he'd been looking for a very long time. Harry sat in the bathwater, soaking, and stared at him. "Who are you?" The man's jaw moved. He seemed to be choosing something, or trying to, and finding that all the choices collapsed into the same answer. "My name is Poseidon." Harry wiped water from his eyes. He was 7, and he'd read every book in Dudley's discarded pile, including the one on Greek mythology that Dudley had thrown at him the previous winter. He knew that name. Poseidon is a myth. "Yes," the man, the god, said, without any offense at all. "They always say that." He was still holding Harry's wrist. He looked down at it, then back up at Harry's face, and something moved through his expression that was too big for the small yellow bathroom. "Can you breathe? Are you all right?" "I breathed water," Harry said. "For a minute. I breathed water and it didn't," he stopped. "That's not normal, is it?" "No," Poseidon said. "It isn't." He let go of Harry's wrist and sat back on his heels, which brought him only slightly less close, because he was still taking up most of the available space. He looked at Harry the way Harry sometimes caught people looking at car accidents, unable to stop, trying to understand. "How long have you lived in this house?" Harry blinked at the subject change. "Always." "Always," Poseidon repeated, and something in his voice had gone very quiet. He looked around the bathroom, at the single small towel on the hook that wasn't Dudley's fluffy one, at the sliver of soap Harry had been making last for 2 weeks, at the bruise on Harry's forearm from where Vernon had grabbed him yesterday morning. Poseidon's gaze stopped on the bruise. Stayed there. The bathroom temperature dropped 2 degrees. "Who did that?" Poseidon said. It wasn't a question. It was the kind of sentence that was already looking for something to do with the answer. Harry pulled his arm toward his chest. "I fell." Poseidon looked at him. The sea-colored eyes were very steady. "You can tell me the truth." "I did fall," Harry said, because technically that part was true, even if it was the part that came after. He'd learned to be very careful with which parts of the truth he said out loud. "I fall a lot." Poseidon was quiet for a moment. Then he reached out and put his hand on top of Harry's head, not patting it, not ruffling it, just resting it there, steady and present, like a benediction. Harry went very still. He couldn't remember the last time someone had touched him like that. Like he was worth handling carefully. "I'm going to ask you something," Poseidon said, "and I need you to try to answer honestly. Not what you think I want to hear. Just the truth." Harry nodded, barely breathing. "Do you feel, when you're in water, do you feel like it belongs to you? Like it knows you?" The silence in the bathroom was absolute. Harry could hear his own heartbeat. He looked at Poseidon for a long time, trying to work out whether this was some kind of trick, whether there was a wrong answer that would result in something bad. But Poseidon's face had nothing in it that looked like a trap. It looked like hope. It looked like the worst kind of hope, the kind that survived a very long time being disappointed. "Yes," Harry said quietly. "I thought everyone felt that." Poseidon made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite something else. He took his hand off Harry's head and stood up to his full height in the small bathroom, which meant he was simultaneously too tall for the ceiling and somehow not touching the ceiling, because the space seemed to accommodate him the way the ocean accommodates a ship. He reached his hand down. "Come out of the tub. I need to speak with your guardians." Harry looked at the offered hand. He looked at the door. "Vernon's not back from the hospital yet. And you," he hesitated. "You came through a locked door." "I did." "How?" "The water in your pipes connects to every ocean on Earth," Poseidon said simply. "I followed the thread." He said it the way someone might say I took the motorway, like it was the obvious practical solution to an ordinary problem. He tilted his head at Harry's expression. "Get dressed. We'll wait for them downstairs." Harry got out of the tub. He didn't know why he did it. He had no reason to trust this enormous strange man who had appeared in his bathroom in the middle of the night and breathed water and spoke like the ground was optional. But the thing was, and Harry would spend years trying to articulate this, there was something about being near him that felt like being near the water. That same hum. That same sense of something vast that was not, despite its size, interested in hurting him. Harry pulled on his overlarge jeans and Dudley's faded t-shirt 3 sizes too big and his trainers with the crack across the left sole, and when Poseidon moved toward the door Harry followed him down the stairs. They sat in the living room and waited. Poseidon sat in Vernon's armchair, which somehow looked less like Vernon's armchair with him in it, and looked around the Dursley sitting room with an expression of profound and building contempt. He looked at the photographs, Dudley at every age, gap-toothed and grinning, Dudley's birthday parties, Dudley on a pony, Dudley at the seaside, and then he looked at Harry, who was sitting on the edge of the sofa in his 2 big clothes with his 2 small towels still damp in his hands, and no photographs anywhere. "Tell me about your parents," Poseidon said. "What do you know about them?" Harry shrugged in the practiced way that meant I know this is where the conversation gets bad. "They died in a car crash. When I was 1. That's what the Dursleys say." "And what do you think?" Harry looked at his hands. "I think they're lying about something. Petunia, Aunt Petunia, she gets this face when she talks about my mum. Like she's scared and angry at the same time. Like she's," he searched for the word. "Like she's working very hard to believe something that she knows isn't completely true." Poseidon was watching him with absolute focus. "Your mother was a woman named Lily Evans. She was a witch." Harry's head came up sharply. "She was brilliant and stubborn and she loved you more than she loved her own life," Poseidon continued. "She died protecting you from a very dark wizard. That much is true. The car crash is a lie your aunt tells herself because the truth is harder to carry." He paused. "Your father was James Potter. A wizard. He died the same night." Harry sat very still. He was processing this at the speed of a child who has always suspected the world was bigger than the version he'd been given, and has now had that suspicion violently confirmed. "You said your mother. Your father. Like you knew them." "I knew of them." "I know of you," Poseidon said, and something complicated moved through his expression, something that was guilt and grief stitched together. Harry. I need to tell you something, and it is going to be difficult to hear, and I am asking you to stay with me through all of it. Harry pulled his knees up onto the sofa, which was against Petunia's rules. He didn't care. Okay. You are not entirely James Potter's son, Poseidon said. You never were. The clock on the mantel ticked. Outside, a car turned the corner 2 streets over. What does that mean? Harry said carefully. Poseidon leaned forward, elbows on his knees, vast hands clasped. He looked, in this moment, less like a god and more like a man who has made mistakes he can't stop paying for. Lily Potter was, there are rules, in my world, about mortals and gods. About what's permitted, what's possible. When Lily was 20, she came to the sea. She was grieving. A friend had just been lost, she didn't know yet how much she was going to lose. And the sea, he stopped. Something crossed his face that was not comfortable to look at. There was a night. 9 months later, you were born. Harry stared at him. He was 7, not stupid. He did the math slowly and watched the answer land. James Potter loved Lily completely, Poseidon said quietly. He loved you completely. He never knew. He could not have known. I used every power I had to ensure that the truth stayed submerged. I told myself it was to protect everyone. I told myself it was to protect you. His jaw tightened. I was a coward. And I'm sorry for it. The silence stretched. So you're Harry started. Father, Poseidon said. Yes. My real father. James Potter was also your real father, Poseidon said, with a kind of fierce precision. He chose you every day of his life without knowing the truth. That makes him real. It makes him yours. I'm not here to replace him. I'm here because, his voice caught, which seemed to surprise even him. Because you have a brother, Harry. And his name is Percy. And he's been waiting for something he didn't have words for his whole life. The headlights of Vernon's car swept across the living room ceiling. Poseidon rose from the armchair. Vernon Dursley came through the front door at midnight with his arm in a sling and the expression of a man who has spent 3 hours in A&E generating rage, looking forward to the moment he got home. He got 3 steps into the house before he registered that the lights were on, and 3 more steps before he registered what was sitting in his living room, and then he stopped so fast that Petunia walked into the back of him. Petunia looked over Vernon's shoulder at the man in the armchair. She went white. Not the startled white of being surprised. The drained white of recognition, the specific pallor of someone seeing a thing they've trained themselves not to believe in. You, she said. Her voice was barely sound. You're not supposed to, Mrs. Dursley, Poseidon said. His voice was perfectly civil. It was the civility of deep water, which is only quiet because it's very deep. You know what I am. I don't. This is, Vernon, call the police? Poseidon said pleasantly. Please. He glanced at Vernon, who had gone a different color, the dark red of a man whose blood pressure has just made a structural decision. Sit down, Mr. Dursley. Vernon did not sit down. Vernon Dursley had built his entire life on the principle that loudness and certainty were the same as power, and he was not about to let some stranger in his living room tell him what to do. He drew himself up to his full width and opened his mouth to begin the speech, the one he reserved for people who needed to understand the natural order of things. Poseidon looked at him. Just looked at him. The glass of water on the side table began to tremble. Then the fish tank in the corner, Dudley's fish, the ones Harry was made to feed and never allowed to name, began to bubble violently. Every tap in the house turned itself on at once, a sudden rushing sound from kitchen and bathroom and the outdoor hose, water running in every room. The pressure in the pipes built until the radiators ticked and shuddered. Vernon sat down. Good, Poseidon said. He stood up from the armchair and moved to where Harry was still sitting on the sofa. He settled one hand on Harry's shoulder, present, steady, not performing anything. Just there. I have spent 7 years angry with myself for not coming sooner. I spent 6 of those years telling myself that the blood protection Lily's sacrifice created would keep him safe. That the love magic surrounding this house would be sufficient. His eyes moved around the living room, the photographs again, the bruise on Harry's arm, the towel in Harry's hands that barely qualified as a towel. It wasn't. And that is on me. You can't take him, Petunia said. She'd found her voice, thin and high and brittle. He left him here. He said, Albus Dumbledore is not his father, Poseidon said, and the temperature dropped again, sudden and real, enough that Petunia's breath came out visible. I am. You're not even, real? Poseidon tilted his head. The fish tank bubbled harder. Your nephew just breathed water for 90 seconds in your bathtub, Mrs. Dursley. I would revise your definition of real. Petunia closed her mouth. I'm not here to punish you, Poseidon said, and his voice had shifted slightly, still low, still huge, but something in it had stepped back from the edge. You were given a burden you didn't want and didn't understand, and fear makes people small and mean in ways they wouldn't otherwise choose to be. I understand that. He looked at Vernon. What I don't understand, and what I will not forgive, is the bruise on my son's arm. Or the ribs. Or the other things that water tells me about when it remembers. Petunia looked at Vernon. Vernon looked at the floor. I'm taking Harry tonight, Poseidon said. You will not contact the authorities. You will tell anyone who asks that he ran away, you won't need to lie very hard, and in a year or 2 even the magical community will stop looking. He looked at Petunia one more time, and it was different from the way he'd looked at Vernon. There was something almost like sorrow in it. His mother loved you, you know. Even at the end. I don't think you deserve that, but I thought you should know. Petunia's face did something complicated that ended in blankness. She looked away. Harry had been sitting through all of this very quietly, taking it in, filing it. He looked up at Poseidon. Where are we going? New York, Poseidon said. To your brother. He looked down at Harry with those sea-colored eyes, and for the first time that night something genuinely warm moved through them, not the enormous impersonal warmth of the ocean, but the specific, particular warmth of a person looking at something they love. Do you want to bring anything? Harry thought about it seriously. He thought about Dudley's 2 big clothes and Dudley's old books and the cupboard under the stairs where he'd slept until 6 months ago before they'd moved him to the 2nd bedroom. He thought about whether there was a single thing in number 4, Privet Drive, that was his, that had been given to him, that had been chosen for him, that belonged to him in any way that mattered. No, he said. He stood up. He was small for 7, undersized, underfed, dark-haired. He looked at Vernon and Petunia Dursley one more time. Vernon was red and deflated, like a balloon someone had put a small hole in. Petunia was standing very straight with her arms crossed and her face carefully empty. Harry didn't say goodbye. He turned away and walked toward Poseidon, and Poseidon took his hand the way he'd taken his wrist in the bathtub, certain, steady, the grip of something that has never needed to prove it's strong. Close your eyes, Poseidon said. Harry closed his eyes. He felt water. Not the standing water of a bathtub, not the running water of a tap. This was water in motion, water with direction and intention, the cold rushing certainty of a river that knows where it's going. It came up around him not from any visible source but from everywhere at once, and it was cold and then it wasn't, and the sounds of Privet Drive, the ticking radiator, the sputtering taps, Petunia's precise and furious breathing, fell away into the hum. The deep, living hum that Harry had been hearing his whole life. It rose now, full-throated and welcoming, like hearing a song you've known since before you were born. Harry Jackson, and it would take him years to make that name feel natural on his tongue, but even now, even before he knew it was his, the name existed somewhere in the water around him, waiting, didn't breathe water this time. He didn't need to. He was in the water, which was different. He was moving through the connective tissue of the world, through the veins of it, through the dark cold rushing places that belonged to no country and every country, and it lasted no longer than a single heartbeat before it stopped. Warmth. Lamplit windows. The smell of something baking even at this hour of the night, vanilla and something cinnamony, the kind of smell that a house accumulates when someone bakes in it regularly, when the walls have absorbed years of someone cooking for love rather than obligation. Harry opened his eyes. He was standing on a small stoop outside a New York apartment building. The street behind him was quiet and late-night empty, yellow puddles of streetlight on wet pavement. Above the door, the building number, 104. Poseidon was beside him, and he was not quite right for this setting. The dark coat was gone, replaced by something more mundane, khaki trousers and a gray shirt, but he still looked like himself, which meant he still looked like the ocean had been compressed into a person's outline, and no amount of khaki was going to fix that. Poseidon knocked. There was a pause. Movement inside, light footsteps, quick and unafraid. The door opened on a woman who had clearly not been asleep. She was in her early 30s, dark-haired and pretty in the way of people who don't know they're pretty, wearing an apron with a smear of flour on the front of it, which confirmed Harry's theory about the baking smell. She opened the door with the easy certainty of someone who wasn't afraid of who might be knocking at midnight, because she'd been waiting. Her eyes went to Poseidon first. Something passed between them, complicated, not quite anger and not quite sorrow and not quite love, but all three things living in the same space, sharing the same address. Then her eyes went to Harry. She went very still. Harry had a sudden intense awareness of what he must look like, small, damp, dressed in clothes 3 sizes too large, with Dudley's old trainers and the kind of thinness that wasn't cute kid thin but something sharper. He had his father's dark hair, which meant he had her son's dark hair, and he had Poseidon's sea-colored eyes staring out of the face of a 7-year-old who'd had a very unusual evening. Sally Jackson pressed one hand to her mouth. "Oh," she said, quietly, through her fingers. "Oh, there you are." It was the second time tonight that someone had said those words to Harry. The first time, it had come from Poseidon, and it had felt enormous and oceanic, the finding of something lost. This time it was quiet and kitchen flour and vanilla and helpless, and it reached into the chest of Harry Potter who was becoming Harry Jackson and did something to the 7-year-old fist that had been clenched there for as long as he could remember. He didn't cry. He was 7, and he'd trained himself out of crying quite thoroughly, and besides he didn't know this woman. But he didn't step back when she came down the step and knelt in front of him and put her hands on his face, carefully, like he was made of something that could break. She looked at him for a long moment, and her eyes were very bright, and she smelled like vanilla, and her hands were warm. "I'm Sally," she said. Her voice was steady in the way of someone who is holding it very carefully. "I know this is a lot to take in tonight. You don't have to decide anything right now. You don't have to feel any particular way." She brushed the damp hair back from his forehead with her thumb. "But I want you to know that you are wanted here. Do you understand that? Whatever else is complicated, that isn't." Harry looked at her. He thought about saying something, but he didn't have words for the thing he was feeling, so he just nodded, once, carefully. Sally Jackson nodded back, like they'd agreed on something important. Then, from the hallway behind her, "Mom? Who is it?" The voice was sleepy, suspicious in the way of a kid who's been woken up by something and isn't going to miss it. Footsteps. A boy appeared in the hallway behind Sally, Harry's age, dark-haired, wearing a t-shirt inside out because he'd clearly just grabbed whatever was nearest, rubbing one eye. He'd frozen in the doorway when he saw Poseidon, with the particular frozenness of someone who is not surprised by his father appearing at midnight, exactly, but is also never quite used to it. Then he saw Harry. Percy Jackson stopped rubbing his eye. He stood in the hallway with his inside-out t-shirt and his mussed hair, and he looked at Harry, and Harry looked at him, and for a moment neither of them said anything at all because there was nothing to say that would have been adequate. It was like looking in a slightly imperfect mirror, the same dark hair, the same lean build, the same sea gray-green eyes. Different faces, not identical, but close enough that the resemblance hit you immediately, hit you wrong, like a note that's almost right but not quite. "Whoa," Percy said. "Yeah," Harry agreed. Is he?" Percy looked at Poseidon. "Is he the thing you said you had to go take care of? The thing you said was urgent?" "Percy, because I've been awake for 3 hours thinking you were fighting some kind of sea monster and you just..." Percy looked back at Harry. He blinked. "You look like me." "You look like me," Harry said. Percy opened and closed his mouth twice. Then he looked at his father again with an expression that was bewildered and hopeful and fragile in the way of something trying very hard not to be. "Is he, Dad? Is he mine?" Poseidon looked at his son. Something moved through his face, pride and sorrow and a love that was too large for the hallway. "He's your twin," Poseidon said quietly. "His name is Harry. And I'm sorry it took this long." Percy didn't say anything for a long moment. He stood very still in the hallway. Then he looked at Harry, really looked at him, the way you look at something you've been looking for in the back of your mind for years without knowing you were looking. He took in the two big clothes and the damp hair and the careful way Harry was standing, slightly sideways, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to take up the full space. Something shifted in Percy's expression. Some decision got made. He crossed the hallway in 3 steps and grabbed Harry by the arm, not rough, but definite, and pulled him inside the apartment. "You're wet," he said. "And you look like you haven't eaten anything." "Mom, he looks like he hasn't eaten anything." "I can see that," Sally said, standing up. "I'm fine," Harry said, on reflex. "You breathed water an hour ago," Poseidon said mildly from the doorway. Percy stopped walking. He turned to look at Harry. "You what?" It was an accident," Harry said. "You breathed water," Percy repeated, like confirming a species identification. "And it didn't hurt you?" "No." Percy stared at him for another beat. Then a grin broke across his face, sudden and wide and slightly unhinged in the way of someone whose world has just gotten a great deal more interesting. "Okay," he said, "okay, that's actually really cool." He started pulling Harry toward the kitchen. "Mom's got blue chocolate chip cookies, they're from the batch she made this afternoon. She makes everything blue because it's our thing. Percy, he needs to eat something and I need to process this and cookies help," Percy said firmly. He pulled out a kitchen chair and pointed at it in the way of someone who has been in this kitchen his entire life and regards it as his domain. Harry sat. Percy sat across from him and pushed the plate of very blue cookies across the table. Harry took one slowly. He looked at it. He took a bite. Percy watched him eat with the focused attention of someone who is trying to solve a puzzle by observing it very carefully. "How come you didn't know?" he asked, after Harry had eaten 2 cookies. "About, us." "I didn't know anything," Harry said simply. "I thought my parents died in a car crash. I thought I was just..." He stopped. "Normal." Percy's expression did something briefly, intensely complicated. "Normal," he repeated. "Yeah." He looked down at his own cookie. "I always knew there was something, I don't know. Like something was missing. Mom always got this look sometimes when I'd ask about..." He stopped himself. He looked up at Harry. She knew. Sally, who had moved to the stove to warm something up, didn't turn around. "I suspected," she said quietly. "When you were born, Percy, there were 2 heartbeats for a long time. And then there was one. And your father couldn't explain it, or wouldn't, which amounts to the same thing." She set a bowl of soup on the table in front of Harry without comment, a very mom move that Harry registered in the part of him that had always known, theoretically, that this was something people did. "I suspected for years. And then your father told me the truth about 6 months ago. Percy looked at his father, who was standing in the kitchen doorway with his arms crossed, taking up the frame. 6 months ago, Percy said. Very flatly. Percy, he was there for 6 months, Percy said, and now there was an edge in his voice, not rage but something close to it, the clean anger of someone who has a point to make and is going to make it. He was in England in some, he looked at Harry. Where were you? Surrey, Harry said. Number 4, Privet Drive. It's very boring and they didn't like me much. Percy looked back at Poseidon. He was in Surrey at number 4, Privet Drive being not liked for 6 months after you knew. I know, Poseidon said. That's really bad, Dad. I know that too. Like, that's actually pretty terrible parenting, even by your standards, Percy. I'm just saying, Percy said, leaning back in his chair with his arms crossed in an unconscious mirror of his father's posture, that the next time you have important information about our family, maybe tell us immediately, instead of waiting for a drowning. Harry looked at Percy across the blue cookies. Percy was 10 seconds into knowing he existed and was already arguing on his behalf. Harry thought about that. He thought about it with the careful, thorough attention of someone who has never had anyone argue on their behalf before, who didn't know what that felt like until this exact moment. It felt like the hum. He has a point, Harry said. Poseidon looked from Percy to Harry with an expression that was simultaneously pained and, underneath the pain, hopelessly fond. There are 2 of them, he said, apparently to nobody in particular. There are 2 of them and they've known each other for 6 minutes. 8 minutes, Percy corrected. We agree on things, Harry said. Sally made a sound at the stove that was definitely a laugh disguised as a cough. Poseidon looked at her. She looked back at him, and some of the complicated things between them settled, not resolved but acknowledged, set aside for now. He looked at his sons, sitting on opposite sides of a kitchen table eating blue cookies at midnight, dark-haired and sea-eyed and more similar than either of them knew yet, and something in his face went quiet. Not sad. Not guilty. Just quiet. I have to go, he said. There are things I have to sort out. There will be someone coming, eventually. A wizard, old and clever, who will want to know where Harry is. Dumbledore? Harry said. Poseidon looked at him. You know that name. I know a lot of things, Harry said, which wasn't entirely true but felt true in the way that mattered. Petunia talked about him when she thought I wasn't listening. She was angry at him. She said he left me there like a parcel. Something moved through Poseidon's expression. That is, unfortunately, accurate. He moved into the kitchen and put a hand on each of their heads, Percy first, then Harry, who didn't flinch from it, which was progress, even if progress shouldn't have been necessary. Dumbledore is not your enemy. But his plan for you, Harry, is built around the idea that you are small and alone and don't know what you are. When he finds out the truth, he paused. Let me speak with him first. Are you going to be okay? Percy asked. Not in a worried way. In the straightforward way of a kid whose father is a god and who has learned to ask practical questions. I'm the god of the sea, Percy, Poseidon said. That doesn't actually answer the question, Percy said. Poseidon looked at him for a beat. I'll be fine. He moved back to the doorway. He looked at Harry one more time. You're safe here. That's not a small thing. He said it like he meant it to land, and it did. Sleep well. Then he was gone, and the water in the pipe settled, and the apartment was warm and smelled like vanilla and the slight metallic tang of the stove's heating element, and Sally was putting a second bowl of soup on the table. Harry sat in the kitchen of the Jacksons' apartment and ate the soup and didn't say much, and Percy ate the soup and said enough for both of them, running through a rapid-fire summary of important things Harry needed to know, that Central Park was close, that the subway was confusing but navigable, that there was a place in Brooklyn that did blue cotton candy, That their building had a super named Marcus who would let you borrow his TV if you were quiet about it, that Percy had school tomorrow. But Harry probably didn't have to go right away, that Harry could have the bunk above Percy's because Percy had tested both bunks and the top one was actually better because it was farther from the radiator. Harry listened to all of this. He thought about number 4, Privet Drive. He thought about the cupboard. He thought about Petunia's face and Vernon's hands and Dudley's cricket bat and the long silences of a house where his existence was the primary inconvenience. He thought about a boy who'd known him for 8 minutes and was already telling him which bunk was better as if it were simply assumed, simply given, simply obvious, that Harry would need to know. "Do you want the top bunk?" Percy asked. "Yes," Harry said. "Cool," Percy said. He poured them both more juice, blue naturally, from a pitcher in the fridge. "Do you know how to fight? Like, actually fight, not school fight?" Harry blinked at the subject change. "No. I'll teach you," Percy said, like it was the most natural offer in the world. "We've got a lot of catching up to do." Harry looked at his twin across the kitchen table, this boy who was everything Harry wasn't yet but could see the shape of, this boy who had a hum inside him that matched Harry's own, this boy who argued with gods and made room for lost brothers and described his city like a gift, and felt the 7-year-old fist in his chest open up. Not all the way. That would take time, and training, and a great many blue cookies and arguments and late nights and hard truths. It would take Percy standing next to him in storms and Sally teaching him that warmth isn't a trap and Poseidon showing up at the exact wrong moment and the right one. But it opened. "Okay," Harry said. "Yeah. Let's do that." Outside, the New York sky was beginning to lighten at its edges. Somewhere in the building's pipes, water moved, not anxiously, not urgently. Just steadily. The way it does when everything is, finally, where it belongs. Chapter 2, Two Sons of the Sea. The first morning Harry woke up in the Jackson apartment, he lay in the top bunk for 20 minutes before he understood why he felt wrong. Nothing hurt. That was it. He ran through the usual inventory, ribs, back, the bruise on his forearm, and found everything at a low, manageable ache rather than the sharp greeting pain had given him every morning at Privet Drive. The mattress was thinner than Dudley's but thicker than his, the blanket smelled like laundry detergent rather than mildew, and the light coming through the curtains was ordinary New York morning light, gray and generous. Nothing hurt, and nobody was banging on the door yet, and somewhere below him Percy was still asleep, one arm hanging off the side of the lower bunk like he'd been mid-gesture when unconsciousness took him. Harry stared at the ceiling. He thought, with great care, this is real. He climbed down the ladder before he could convince himself otherwise. The kitchen was empty but warm. Sally had left a note on the table in quick, looping handwriting, bagels in the bag on the counter. Orange juice in the fridge. Back by 9, had to open the bookshop early. Help yourself to everything. Below the note, in smaller writing, everything means everything, Harry. Not just what you think you're allowed. Harry stood in the kitchen holding the note for a moment longer than necessary. Then he got himself a bagel and sat at the table and ate it without rushing, without checking the door, without calculating whether the sound of his chewing was loud enough to bring someone down the stairs. Percy appeared 20 minutes later in the same inside-out t-shirt, hair doing something architectural, dragging himself toward the refrigerator with the focused misery of someone who is not a morning person and considers that fact a moral position. He pulled out the orange juice, drank directly from the carton, registered Harry's presence, and pointed at him. "You made that face," Percy said. "What face?" "The face like you're surprised the food is real." He put the carton back, grabbed 2 more bagels, and dropped back into the chair across from Harry. "Mom said you would. She said to tell you the food is real and it's yours, and also she noticed you only took 1 bagel, so she's already mentally preparing a whole speech about it." Harry looked at the bagel in his hands. "It's a big bagel. It's a normal bagel. There are 8 more in the bag." Percy tore into his with the enthusiasm of someone who views breakfast as a contact sport. She's going to teach you to eat properly. Fair warning. She did it with me when I was little. I was a really picky eater, and she has absolutely no mercy about it. I'm not picky, Harry said. I eat anything. I know, Percy said, and his voice was briefly different, quieter, less casual, before he pulled it back. Yeah. I know you do. He ate in silence for a moment. Then, businesslike, okay. Today we're going to the park. Harry raised an eyebrow. Not for fun. Well, partly for fun. But also because I need to show you something, and I need space to do it, and the patch near the north end of the reservoir is usually empty in the mornings. Show me what? Percy looked at him with the particular look of someone about to do something impressive and trying to pretend they're not about to do something impressive. What can you do? So far. Like, you told me about the hose in the garden, and the breathing water thing, but what else? Harry thought about it honestly. Things move sometimes when I'm angry or scared. Not always water, sometimes it is, but sometimes it's just things. The glass in the kitchen cabinet shattered once. The lights in my room blew out once. He paused. Once it rained inside. Just in my room. Percy stared at him. It rained inside your room. I was having a bad night. That's incredible, Percy said, with complete sincerity. He looked deeply envious. I can't make it rain inside. I've tried. He said this as if attempting indoor precipitation was a perfectly normal experimental goal. Okay. So you've got raw stuff. Uncontrolled. Like I had when I was little, but for you it's more water-specific than mine was at the start. He nodded to himself, apparently reaching a conclusion. Right. Park. Now. Bring your shoes. I'm wearing my shoes, Harry said. Percy looked at the cracked trainers. He opened his mouth. Don't, Harry said. Percy closed his mouth. He finished his bagel. He did not say anything about the shoes, which cost him something, Harry could tell, but he paid it without complaint, and that mattered. They went to the park. Central Park in the early morning was a different creature from the postcard version, less curated, less performed, more alive. The paths were still damp from overnight rain, and the air had that particular urban morning smell of wet concrete and green things and someone's coffee from a cart 300 yards away. Percy walked like he owned the park, which wasn't arrogance exactly, more like long familiarity. He knew where the paths split, where the ground went uneven, where the park maintenance guys didn't come until noon. He brought Harry to a spot near the reservoir that Harry wouldn't have found on his own, a clearing set back from the path, screened by trees, where the ground sloped gently toward the water's edge. The reservoir was flat and dark in the morning light, breathing slowly. Percy stopped at the water's edge. He looked at it, and then he did something. Harry watched. He'd thought he knew what this was going to be, some kind of trick, maybe, the kind of thing that happened when he wasn't trying, the involuntary lurch of accidental magic. What Percy did was nothing like that. He raised one hand, easy, like reaching for something off a shelf, and the water at the edge of the reservoir rose. Not splashed, not churned, rose, cleanly, a column of it, 3 feet wide and 4 feet tall, and it hung there in the morning air like it was waiting for instructions. Percy turned his hand, and the column bent. He pushed his hand forward, and it shot like a fist across the surface of the reservoir, raising a wake that hit the far shore 60 yards away with a sound like a small boat landing. He pulled it back, and the water returned to him, not falling, returning, and settled back without a ripple. Harry watched all of this with his arms folded and his head tilted. Okay, he said. How? It's yours, Percy said. That's the whole trick. You don't ask it to move. You just reach for what's already yours. He turned to face Harry properly. When you breathed water last night. What did it feel like? Harry considered. Like it already knew me. Like I'd interrupted something. Right. And the hose in the garden. Same. Like it moved because it wanted to, not because I made it. Percy pointed finger guns at him. That's the thing. You didn't make anything. You just got out of the way and let it be what it already is. He stepped back from the water's edge. Try. Harry stepped forward. He looked at the reservoir. He thought about the hum, the one that had been there his whole life, the one he'd heard in the bathtub, the one he'd felt moving through the pipes at number 4, and he stopped thinking about it and just let it be there. The reservoir breathed. He felt it the way you feel your own pulse when you press your finger to your wrist, not created, just noticed. The water had weight and intention and a kind of low, continuous awareness that wasn't thought exactly but wasn't nothing. He reached for it the way Percy had described, the way you reach for a glass on a table, easy, expected. The reservoir surface buckled. Not a column, not anything controlled, a convulsion, 3 feet of open water slamming upward at once like something had breached from below, a wave that went in 4 directions simultaneously and soaked both of them from the knees down before it landed. Percy was grinning. Yeah. Yeah, there it is. Harry stood in the wet morning grass with reservoir water dripping off him and felt something entirely new move through his chest. Not the hum. Something louder. Something that wanted to do that again. Again, he said. Again, Percy agreed. They were at the reservoir for 2 hours. By the end, Harry could raise a column and hold it for about 40 seconds before losing the thread. He could redirect running water, a nearby drainage stream, without touching it. He couldn't do what Percy did with the wave, not yet, but Percy told him that had taken him 6 months, so Harry had context. The accidental magic, the unfocused bursts, those still happened when he wasn't paying attention, but they happened louder now, more clearly, like something had been given permission to exist. They walked home soaking wet and talking at high speed. What about the other stuff? Harry asked. The lights blowing out. When it rained inside. That's probably the divine spark doing weird things because it had nowhere to go, Percy said, wringing out the hem of his shirt without breaking stride. You were basically a pressure cooker. Water is your thing, like, specifically water, and whatever the Demigod general purpose force is. But when you're bottled up for years and traumatized, he said it plainly, no inflection, not making it a thing, which Harry appreciated, the power just comes out wherever it can find a crack. The goal is to open up the main valve so it stops leaking through the walls. Harry thought about this. That is an extremely plumbing-oriented metaphor. I live with a lot of plumbers in my head, Percy said solemnly. Sally was back when they got home, standing in the kitchen making lunch with the radio on, and she looked at them, both soaking, both bright-eyed, Percy with a scratch on his cheek from where Harry had lost control of a stick of driftwood and it had gone sideways, and she said, shoes off at the door, and nothing else. She fed them both. Properly fed them, sandwiches and soup and fruit, more than either of them wanted to finish but more than either of them stopped eating. Harry noticed she kept putting things in front of him quietly, without ceremony, without pointing it out. Just making sure the plate was full. Just making sure. In the afternoon she sat him down with a cup of tea and said, I need to understand where we are legally. Do you have documents? Passport, birth certificate? Harry shook his head. Sally nodded like she'd expected this. I have a friend who can help with that. It'll take a few weeks. In the meantime, she looked at him directly. What do you want your name to be? Harry sat with the question. It was a more serious question than it sounded. Jackson, he said. I want Jackson. He thought about James Potter, who had loved Lily and loved him without knowing the truth, and who was dead at 21, and who deserved better than to be erased. Harry James Jackson. Sally wrote it down. She didn't make it sentimental. She just wrote it down, like it was a practical matter, which it was, and which it also wasn't, and she seemed to understand both things simultaneously. "Good," she said. "That's a good name." The weeks that followed were a kind of controlled chaos that Harry had no reference frame for. Percy was relentless. Not in the way of someone who didn't know when to stop, but in the way of someone who had identified a project and was deeply invested in it. He dragged Harry to the park every morning. He taught him the defensive basics he'd picked up from Chiron, who was, Percy explained without any particular drama, a centaur who ran a summer camp for demigods, and they'd be going in June, so Harry should be prepared, and Harry absorbed it with a focus that made Percy raise his eyebrows. "You don't mess around," Percy said, after Harry had successfully avoided every grab Percy threw at him for a full minute, which was a 30-second improvement from the previous day. "I've had practice," Harry said, and Percy's expression went briefly, sharply understanding, and then moved on. The physical part came quickly. Harry was small but fast, built for agility rather than force, and the demigod blood meant his body adapted in ways that normal 7-year-olds' bodies didn't. His reflexes sharpened. His coordination, once he stopped second-guessing it, was startling. He had a quality Percy noticed and filed away, a kind of total, present calm in the middle of movement, like something clicked off in him and the body just acted without asking permission. The water control developed in spikes and plateaus. He'd go 3 days without improvement and then suddenly, overnight, jump 2 levels, like his power was catching up to his potential in chunks. Percy said that was normal, that he'd done the same thing, which Harry suspected was true but also suspected Percy was being generous. What surprised both of them was the other thing. It happened the 3rd week, on a Thursday, when they were in the park and a group of older kids, 12, 13, decided the clearing by the reservoir was theirs and said so with the kind of casual physical confidence that relies on size difference. There were 4 of them, and they were bigger than Percy, and substantially bigger than Harry, and the one in front told them to clear out with language Percy objected to. "We were here first," Percy said, with the flat practicality of someone who is not particularly interested in the social logistics of this situation. The bigger kid moved forward. Harry stepped in front of Percy. It wasn't defensive, wasn't scared, he just stepped in front, easy, like moving to a better position, and looked up at the kid with the sea-colored eyes that were currently doing something Percy hadn't quite seen before. Something that took up more space than a 7-year-old's eyes should take up. The kid stopped walking. He stood there and looked at Harry and couldn't quite figure out why he'd stopped, but he had. "Go somewhere else," Harry said. Conversationally. Without emphasis. They went somewhere else. Percy stared at the spot where they'd been. He stared at Harry. What was that? Harry blinked. He hadn't done anything specific, he'd felt the hum shift, felt something in the water pressure of the air change, some barometric weight settle. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Your eyes went," Percy made a gesture. "Like Dad's. When he's being the sea instead of a person." Harry sat on that for a while. That evening he asked Poseidon about it, because Poseidon had developed a habit of showing up, not reliably scheduled, but consistently present, appearing at the apartment 2 or 3 times a week with the casual inevitability of tidal patterns. He'd sit at the kitchen table and drink the tea Sally made for him without comment and talk to his sons like a man making up for lost time by using all of it at once. "Authority over living things near water," Poseidon said, without apparent surprise. "All my children have some capacity for it. The ocean sets the terms for everything that lives near it, and its children carry that in different concentrations." He looked at Harry. "With you it seems concentrated. I suspect because you spent 7 years being told you had no power over anything." Harry thought about that. "So it's compensatory." "It's yours," Poseidon said, the same way Percy had said it about the water. Not explaining, correcting. The theory about why it developed strongly is just theory. The power is real. Sally, from behind her book, "Stop analyzing your children and tell them about the camp." I was getting to the camp. You've been getting to the camp for 2 weeks. It requires. Poseidon looked at her. She looked back at him over her book with the steady patience of a woman who has been managing a god's evasiveness for a decade and has developed specific tools for it. He looked back at his sons. Camp Half-Blood. It's a training camp for demigods on Long Island. Run by Chiron. Percy knows Chiron. You'll go in June. I know about the camp, Percy said. I've been going since last summer. Harry hasn't. And this summer will be different. Poseidon's voice shifted, still even, but with something underneath it that made both boys pay closer attention. There are things moving in the divine world. Politics. Old grievances. Something was disturbed when I claimed Harry, it announced itself, in the way these things do, and there are gods who will be curious, and some who will be hostile, and some who are already watching. Which gods? Harry asked. Poseidon looked at him. Hera, for one. Percy made a face. Of course. She is not fond of mortal children of the gods at the best of times. She will be particularly not fond of Harry because his existence represents, he paused, choosing. A complication she didn't anticipate. What kind of complication? Harry said. The prophecy kind, Poseidon said, quietly. There are prophecies that concern the children of the eldest Olympians. Percy knows about one of them. Harry, he looked at his younger by minute son, you are tangled in a different one. A different world's prophecy. And the question of what happens when two prophecies claim the same bloodline is not one anyone has a clean answer to. Harry absorbed this. He thought about Dumbledore, whom he'd never met, who had put him in a cupboard by proxy and built a plan around his ignorance. He thought about a prophecy, about being tangled in something, about being the subject of other people's plans for the third time in a very short life. Can you tell me what the prophecy says? Harry asked. The wizarding one. Poseidon was quiet for a moment. Then, the one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches. Born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies. And the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not. Harry sat with it. He tasted each line. Power the Dark Lord knows not. Yes. So he doesn't know about, Harry gestured loosely, encompassing the park training and the reservoir column and the way the water in the pipes moved when he was upset. He knows about magic, Poseidon said. He does not know about this. Something settled in Harry's chest, not relief exactly, more like the feeling of finding solid ground. Good, he said simply. Percy was watching his brother with the focused expression he used when he was recalibrating. Over the weeks, they developed a specific vocabulary for each other, not words, not yet, but a catalogue of expressions and silences that were beginning to mean things. This one meant he's more like me than I expected, and I'm still figuring out how I feel about that. The weeks built toward summer. May arrived and Sally enrolled Harry at Percy's school for the last 6 weeks of the year, which was less about the education and more about logistics. Harry needed to exist somewhere official while his documents were being sorted, and Percy's school was familiar territory. Harry took to it the way he took to most things, quietly, completely, and faster than expected. He was smarter than his years, in the particular way of children who've been left alone with books. He read everything and retained it. He was ahead in math, ahead in reading, slightly behind in everything that required prior instruction, the group projects, the social choreography, but he watched and learned and within 2 weeks was navigating it. Percy introduced him to his friends with the simple authority of prior claim, "This is my brother, he just moved here, he's fine." Harry was aware of how much weight that sentence carried. How much it smoothed. He was aware of Percy doing it on purpose, and he didn't say anything about it, and Percy didn't say anything about it, and that was its own kind of vocabulary. June came, and with it Camp Half-Blood. The Long Island Sound was visible from the camp's hill, a strip of gray-blue horizon beyond the pine trees, present and watchful. Harry felt it immediately when they crossed the invisible boundary, the way the air changed, thickened, became something more than air. He stopped walking. Percy noticed. "The wards," he said. "You'll get used to it." "It's not the wards," Harry said. He was looking toward the sound. "It's louder here." Percy followed his gaze. "Oh," he said, and then, quietly, "Yeah. Yeah, it is." Chiron was waiting for them at the main house, a centaur in a wheelchair disguise who dropped the disguise as soon as they were past the boundary, which Harry absorbed with the same calm he brought to most things. He shook Harry's hand with a grave courtesy that Harry found he respected, because Chiron didn't talk to him like a child being introduced to a world he didn't know. He talked to him like someone who had assessed the situation and found it clear. "Harry Jackson," Chiron said, and paused. "There will be others here who will know that name from a different context. The wizarding world has a long reach. I'd advise readiness, not caution." "Readiness is better than caution," Harry agreed. Chiron looked at him for a moment. Something moved through his ancient, patient eyes. "Yes," he said. "It generally is." The other campers were a different matter. Camp Half-Blood ran on a specific social ecology, cabin hierarchies, claimed versus unclaimed, the subtle power dynamics of whose divine parent outranked whose. Harry and Percy arrived with the specific advantage of being claimed by Poseidon, which put them at the top of a very particular ladder. It also attracted a specific kind of attention. Clarice Larue found Harry on his third day. She was 12, big for her age, with a combative forward energy that Harry recognized from Dudley and immediately understood was different. Dudley was a bully because he was comfortable and empty. Clarice was aggressive because she was the daughter of Ares and the camp pecking order was something she'd built with her fists and she wasn't interested in revising it. She cornered Harry near the Poseidon cabin on his way back from the archery range, flanked by two of her cabin mates. "You're the new one," she said. "Yes," Harry said. "Jackson's little brother." "We're the same age," Harry said, with the mildness of someone who is making a small correction, not starting a fight. "You look little," Clarice said. Harry looked at her. The hum shifted. He didn't do it on purpose, it was reflexive, the same thing that had happened with the boys at the reservoir, but the air pressure changed, and Clarice felt it, and her eyes narrowed. "You gonna do something?" she asked. "Are you?" Harry asked. The two of them stood in the afternoon sun outside the Poseidon cabin, and the smart money, given the size differential and the experience differential and the backup differential, should have been on Clarice. Except Harry wasn't standing like someone who was calculating odds. He was standing like someone who had already decided that the odds were a suggestion. Clarice was a lot of things, but she wasn't stupid. She measured Harry Jackson with professional eyes and found something that made her rethink the shape of the conversation. Not back down, she didn't back down, that wasn't in her, but the angle changed. "We do capture the flag on Friday," she said. "Don't get in my way." "I'll try," Harry said, which was not a promise. She left. Her cabin mates followed. Harry went back to looking at the archery range. Percy appeared at his shoulder from absolutely nowhere. What did she want? "To establish the order of things," Harry said. "Did she?" "Not really," Harry said. Percy grinned. Capture the flag on Friday was, in Percy's words, the thing. The camp's primary organized chaos, teams divided by cabin alliances, actual combat with actual weapons, celestial bronze, so the monsters felt it and the humans didn't, but the humans still bruised, because the force behind a blow was still force. Percy had told Harry about it with the enthusiasm of a true believer, and Harry had listened and concluded that it was basically warfare with a specific rule set, which made it more interesting than most things. Harry's team, Poseidon, Hermes, Apollo, had the forest. Ares, Athena, Dionysus had the creek. The game lasted 40 minutes, which was long by camp standards. The strategy meetings beforehand had established basic positions, but Harry had sat quietly through the meeting and then, afterward, walked the forest terrain by himself for an hour and come back with a different suggestion that Annabeth Chase, who was 10, and small, and terrifyingly intelligent, had listened to with the specific focus of someone recognizing a useful mind. If Ares goes for the direct approach through the east path, Harry said, which they will because Clarice runs a blunt attack, we pull back the east line and draw them into the trees. The creek access point on the north is their real offensive, that's where the actual strike will come from. If we collapse east and reinforce north, they waste half their attack on an empty corridor. Annabeth looked at him for a long moment. How do you know Clarice runs a blunt attack? She said don't get in her way, Harry said. She's not thinking about angles. She wants direct contact. Annabeth smiled, which on her face was less warmth and more the look of a chess player who has just found the piece she needed. I'll adjust the east line. The game went almost exactly as Harry had predicted. Clarice hammered the east corridor with 7 of her cabin and found nobody. The north push came at 18 minutes, hard and fast, and ran into the reinforced position Harry had suggested, which slowed them by 8 minutes. That was enough. The flag came home at minute 40 via a Hermes cabin runner who Harry had quietly suggested take the long route through the stream bed, which was technically their side of the boundary and which nobody had thought to guard. The horn sounded. Harry's team won. Clarice came out of the forest at minute 41 with mud on her armor and a specific expression that was anger filtering through respect, which in Aries Kid terms was practically a friendship request. She pointed at Harry across the field. Next week, she said. Next week, Harry agreed. Percy slung an arm around Harry's shoulders. Okay, he said, you're terrifying and I'm proud of you. He paused. Also Annabeth wants to know if you've ever done formal military strategy. I read a lot of books, Harry said. The Dursleys had a library. They didn't know I was using it. Percy processed this. His expression moved through several things, the warm, complicated understanding that had become his default response to Harry's casual references to Privet Drive, and settled on something practical. We're going to go so well at this, he decided. That evening, sitting on the cabin porch in the last of the day's light with the sound of the Long Island Sound rolling in from the hill, Percy said, "Do you miss it? England." Harry thought about it seriously, which Percy had learned to wait for. Harry didn't give fast answers on real questions. "I miss what I thought it might have been," he said finally. "Like, there's this version of growing up where my parents don't die and I grow up in their house and I know what I am from the start. I miss that version, even though it was never real." He looked at the water through the trees. "I don't miss number 4. I don't miss Surrey. I don't miss any actual thing that existed." He paused. "I miss not knowing, sometimes. Because when you don't know what you've lost it hurts less." Percy was quiet. "Does it hurt less?" "No," Harry admitted. "But you tell yourself it does." "Yeah," Percy said. "I do that too." "About Dad?" He stretched out on the porch steps, looking at the sky. "He's getting better. He left me in Surrey for 6 months after he knew," Harry said, without particular heat. "He left me at Yancey Academy for 3 semesters before he told Mom what I was," Percy said. "Before she told me. Before anyone told me anything." He turned his head to look at Harry. "He's a god. Like, genuinely a god, not just someone powerful. He actually thinks in centuries and oceans, and individual 7-year-olds don't always register as urgent when you're trying to balance the tides. It doesn't make it right." He paused. "But he came." "He came," Harry acknowledged. "And he keeps coming," Percy said. 2, 3 times a week. I've never had that. For years it was, maybe once a summer if we were lucky. And now he sat up, shrugging, trying to locate how he felt about it. "Shows up. Like a normal person. And sits at the kitchen table and drinks tea and talks to us. And it's weird and I don't know what to do with it. I think we just let it happen, Harry said. Percy looked at him. When did you get wise? I've always been wise, Harry said seriously. You're the one who's catching up. Percy threw a pinecone at him. Harry caught it without looking, which was showing off, and both of them knew it and neither of them cared. Later, when the camp was quiet, Harry lay in his bunk in the Poseidon cabin and listened to the Long Island Sound through the window, real ocean, not a reservoir, not a bathtub, not a memory, and the hum was enormous and constant and completely sure of itself. It was the same hum. It had always been the same hum. He'd heard it at number 4 and taken comfort from it, this nameless vibration in the standing water of the tub, not knowing what it was. Not knowing it was his. Not knowing the ocean was calling him home. He knew now. He let the sound fill him, salt and depth and the living, breathing weight of all that water, and he thought about what Poseidon had said. 2 prophecies. The same bloodline. He thought about the wizarding world he'd never seen, the one his mother had belonged to, the one that had a letter coming with his name on it, and it would come, eventually, he knew it would come. Poseidon had told him about Hogwarts with a careful precision that said eventually, not yet. He wasn't afraid of it. This was perhaps the thing that would surprise people the most, eventually, that Harry Jackson walked toward the wizarding world without fear, without hesitation, the way he walked toward the reservoir in the mornings. Because the water had always known him, and he had always known the water, and he was not going to go back to being someone who hid in a bathtub from the things that wanted to hurt him. He was going to go to the surface. He was going to breathe the air. And the Dark Lord who'd marked him as an equal was going to find out exactly what that meant. The Long Island Sound rolled in. Harry closed his eyes. The hum said, exactly right. Now sleep. He slept. Chapter 3, The Letters Don't Stop. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in July, 3 weeks into Harry's second summer at camp. Sally found it on the kitchen table when she got home from the bookshop, which was interesting because she hadn't left a window open and the door had been locked. It was addressed in green ink, Mr. H. Jackson, Cabin 3, Camp Half-Blood, Long Island, which was even more interesting, because the address meant someone knew exactly where Harry was, and had known for some time, and had been waiting for the right moment to announce it. She called Poseidon before she called the boys. He arrived in the kitchen 3 minutes later looking like he'd been expecting this conversation and had been hoping to have it on his own terms and knew he was out of time on both counts. You knew this was coming, Sally said. I knew it was coming, Poseidon agreed. Sally put the kettle on. Sit down. He sat. They regarded each other across the kitchen table with the specific complicated dynamic of two people who have a long history and a lot of feelings about it and have reached a functional equilibrium that requires occasional maintenance. She pushed the letter toward him. He looked at it without touching it. Hogwarts, he said. Hogwarts, she confirmed. Which means the wizarding world knows he's alive and knows where he is and has known, presumably, for a while. She tilted her head. Does Dumbledore know he's yours? He knows now, Poseidon said. I told him in October. After I took Harry. Sally's eyebrows went up. October. That's 9 months ago. He needed time to adjust. And you needed time to figure out what you were going to say to him, Sally said, without malice, just reading the situation accurately, which she'd always been good at. The kettle boiled. She poured 2 cups. What did he say? Poseidon wrapped his hands around the mug. He said that Harry Potter belongs to the wizarding world. That there is a prophecy, a dark wizard, a destiny that requires Harry's presence in that world. He paused. He was very polite about it. He's always polite, Sally said. That's what makes him dangerous. Poseidon looked at her with something that was close to appreciation. Yes. Exactly that. And what did you say? I said that Harry Jackson belongs to himself, and that he will make his own choices about which worlds to occupy. He drank the tea. Then Dumbledore said that the blood protection, Lily's sacrifice, the love magic anchored to her blood, had been disrupted when I moved Harry from the Dursleys. That Voldemort, when he returns. When, Poseidon said flatly. Dumbledore is certain about it. I'm inclined to believe him. When Voldemort returns, he will no longer be deflected by the blood wards. Harry will be vulnerable in ways he might not otherwise have been. Sally was quiet for a moment. Is that true? Probably, Poseidon said. It is also true that my son spent 6 years in that house being hit. The blood protection protected him from external magical threats and did precisely nothing about the threats inside the walls. His voice had gone very level. I made my choice. Sally nodded slowly. Then, the boys are going to want to read the letter. I know. And Harry is going to want to go. Poseidon looked at her. What makes you say that? Because he's been waiting for it, Sally said simply. He doesn't talk about it much, but he reads about the wizarding world. He found those books at the library, the ones the wizarding world leaks into regular publishing sometimes, the folklore collections. He reads them carefully. She paused. He's been building a picture. Poseidon was quiet for a moment. He's 10. He's 10 and he's been building a picture of a world his mother belonged to and preparing himself for it, Sally said, with a gentleness that was also completely firm. Don't underestimate him. Either of them. The boys came home from camp at 6, loud and sandy and arguing about something that had happened at the archery range, and Sally waited until they'd eaten and the argument had concluded, Harry had been right, which Percy was processing, before she put the letter on the table. They both looked at it. Harry reached out and picked it up. He read it slowly, and Sally watched his face, and his face did the thing it did when something important was happening, went very still, went inward, all the processing invisible. Percy read it over his shoulder and got through it faster because Percy read everything at a controlled sprint. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Percy said. Okay. That's the one. That's the wizarding school. First on the list, Harry said, still reading. The Standard Book of Spells, Grade 1. A History of Magic. Magical Theory. He lowered the letter. He looked at Poseidon, who had stayed at the table. You knew this was coming. Yes, Poseidon said. And Dumbledore knows where I am. Since October. Harry sat with this for a moment. Not processing whether to be angry, he was, a little, at the 9-month gap, but processing what mattered. He's going to want to meet me. He's going to want to do considerably more than meet you, Poseidon said. He has a plan for you, Harry. He's had one since the night your parents died. In that plan, you go to Hogwarts alone, you grow up knowing you're famous but not knowing why you're powerful, and at the right moment, when you are old enough and prepared enough by circumstances he's arranged, you face Voldemort. His voice was careful. Not angry, not editorial. Just clear. That plan requires you to be a particular kind of person. Humble. Isolated. Reliant on guidance. Harry looked at him. I'm none of those things. No, Poseidon agreed. You're not. What happens if I go anyway? On my own terms? Poseidon looked at his son, 10 years old, sea-eyed, with the kind of stillness that wasn't passivity but readiness, and something moved through his expression. Pride and worry in the same breath. Then Dumbledore has to revise his plan. Which he will resist, because he's been running it for 9 years and he's convinced it's necessary. He paused. But the wizarding world is yours, Harry. Your mother's world. You have every right to it. I'm not going to be the one who keeps you from it. I'm going, Harry said, simply and completely. I know, Poseidon said. Percy had been very quiet through this exchange, which meant he was thinking hard. "I'm going too," he said. Harry looked at him. "You're not a wizard." "I'm a demigod," Percy said, with the unassailable logic of someone who has never once accepted the definition of a situation he didn't agree with. "My dad's a god. I can breathe underwater. I fight monsters with a sword made of magical metal. You think I can't handle a school?" He looked at Poseidon. "Can I go?" Poseidon looked at him for a long moment. "You're not magical in the wizarding sense. You couldn't do their magic." "I don't need to do their magic," Percy said. "I have my own. The Hogwarts curriculum, I'll audit," Percy said. Or whatever. I'll figure it out. But I'm not letting Harry walk into a world full of people who think they know him and think they own him and who've built a whole plan around him." He stopped. He looked at Harry. "I'm not letting you go alone." Harry held his brother's gaze. He thought about 9 months ago, the kitchen table, Percy handing him blue cookies at midnight, Percy pulling out the chair like it was obvious, like it was simply given. He thought about the reservoir in the morning and capture the flag and the porch at camp and "I'll teach you, we've got a lot of catching up to do." "Okay," Harry said. "Okay?" Percy said, like he'd been prepared for more resistance. "Just okay?" "I wasn't going to argue with you," Harry said. "I just wanted to see how you made the case." Percy stared at him. You're the worst." "Poseidon," Sally said, cutting through before this could escalate, "can Percy attend?" Poseidon considered. "I'll speak with Dumbledore. There are precedents for non-magical individuals attending Hogwarts in limited capacities, historically, the children of foreign dignitaries, that sort of thing. And Percy's nature is not, he is not without power. The school's wards will recognize him as something." He paused. "I'll make it happen." "Good," Sally said. She collected the mugs. "Then I suggest someone writes back to that owl before it knocks over my plants." There was, indeed, a large tawny owl sitting on the kitchen windowsill that none of them had noticed, regarding the room with the professional patience of a postal service that has been doing this for 1,000 years and is not impressed by any of it. Dumbledore came 3 days later. He didn't use the door. There was a knock, and Sally opened it, and there was no one there, and then there was a sound from the kitchen, a dry, gentle sound, like paper settling, and when Sally went to the kitchen Albus Dumbledore was sitting at her kitchen table in a plum-colored robe with silver moons on it, looking entirely at home, which was impressive given that he was sitting in a New York apartment having presumably operated past whatever wards a god of the sea kept on his family's residence. Sally Jackson put the kettle on without a word because she was not going to be outclassed in her own kitchen by a wizard in a plum robe. Harry and Percy came in from the living room, because the silence had a specific quality that meant adults are doing something important. "Come and see." They stopped in the kitchen doorway and looked at Dumbledore, and Dumbledore looked back at them, and there was a brief, mutual assessment that was extremely information-dense. Dumbledore was old, genuinely, specifically old, the kind of old that has accumulated something, that has weight to it. He had half-moon spectacles and a long white beard and eyes that were very, very blue and doing a great deal of quiet work behind the pleasant expression. He looked at Harry and something moved through those eyes that was not simple, it was relief and calculation and grief and the particular look of someone revising a plan they've been running for 9 years. "Harry," he said. His voice was warm. Genuinely warm, Harry thought, not performed. This was a man who actually cared, and that made him harder to be simply angry at. "It's wonderful to meet you, Professor Dumbledore," Harry said. "You put me in a cupboard." The warmth didn't disappear, but it got complicated. Dumbledore looked at him over his spectacles. "Not directly. I placed you with your aunt and uncle in the belief that Lily's sacrifice would protect me from Voldemort," Harry said. "Yes. Not from Vernon." He said it without heat, just laid it out as a fact the way he'd lay out a math problem. The Blood Wards worked very well on the one threat they were designed for and completely failed to address the 4 threats inside the house. Dumbledore was very still for a moment. "You're right," he said, quietly. "And I am sorry for it." Harry looked at him. He was looking for the deflection, the redirection, the reframing that would make the apology a prelude to something else. He didn't find it, exactly. The apology seemed real. He filed it away. "Thank you," he said, which was not forgiveness and was not forgiveness. It was an acknowledgement, precisely calibrated. Percy had been leaning in the doorway watching this with the expression of someone watching a tennis match played at a very high level. He said, "I'm Percy. His brother. I'm coming to Hogwarts." Dumbledore looked at Percy with the mildly surprised but adapting expression of a man who has dealt with demigods exactly once before, during a complicated incident in 1972 that was classified even by wizarding standards. "Poseidon mentioned you might join us," he said. "The logistics can be arranged. Your particular gifts would be categorized, I believe, under the historical precedent of non-magical allied attendees." He paused. "You would study alongside Harry but would not be expected to participate in standard magical examinations." "I'll still do them," Percy said. "Percy, how hard can they be?" Percy asked, with the cheerful confidence of someone who has never failed at anything by the simple method of refusing to accept that failure was possible. Dumbledore looked at Percy over his spectacles for a long moment. Something moved through his expression that might, in a different context, have been humor. "Quite hard, in fact," he said. "But I admire the spirit." Sally put tea in front of Dumbledore. He took it with the easy grace of someone who accepts tea wherever it's offered, as a matter of principle. He looked at Harry again. "I want to speak with you honestly, if I may." "You may," Harry said, sitting across from him. "There is a darkness coming," Dumbledore said. No preamble, no softening. Harry appreciated it. Tom Riddle, Voldemort, is not gone. He is diminished, displaced, disembodied, but he is not dead, and he is working toward return. The prophecy that concerns you, he paused. Your father told you of it? Born as the 7th month dies, Harry said. Power the Dark Lord knows not. Dumbledore nodded slowly. I spent 9 years believing I knew what that power was. Love. The love your mother poured into the sacrifice that saved you. And that is real. Lily's magic is real, it marked you, it lives in you. He looked at Harry with those complicated blue eyes. But I confess that I did not account for the possibility that the power the Dark Lord knows not might be, considerably more literal. Harry said nothing. He waited. Your father's power, Dumbledore said. The divine inheritance. Tom Riddle has studied magic more comprehensively than perhaps any wizard alive. But he has studied magic. He has no frame of reference for what you are. He leaned forward slightly. That is not a comfort, Harry. It is a complication. Because when he discovers what you are, and he will want it. He will want to understand it, to use it, to own it if he can. He is that kind of mind. He can't own it, Harry said, flatly. No, Dumbledore agreed. He can't. But he will try, and the trying will be dangerous. He sat back. I am not here to control you. I want to be clear about that. Poseidon made it very plain that, a brief pause that contained volumes. I understand that my previous approach was, structurally flawed. I am here to offer Hogwarts as a resource. As a home, if you choose to make it one. And as honest an alliance as I can manage. Harry looked at him for a long time. Then he said, why did you really come to see me yourself? You could have sent McGonagall. Dumbledore looked at him. The blue eyes behind the spectacles did something quiet and genuine. Because I wanted to see who you'd become, he said simply. 9 years ago I made choices about your life based on what I knew and what I feared. I wanted to see whether the boy in front of me was," he stopped, which was unlike him. This was a man who always knew what he wanted to say. He finished, "whether the choices I made had left you anything worth working with." Harry held his gaze. And Dumbledore said, "I find I am going to have to revise my plan quite substantially." Something that was almost a smile moved the corner of Harry's mouth. "Good." The Hogwarts letters, plural now, Harry's original and a second one that arrived the following day bearing Percy's name and the stamp of guest attendee, non-magical, allied status, were accompanied by a third letter, this one from Professor Minerva McGonagall, which contained the train information, the platform, and a brief personal note that said, "I knew your mother. She would be proud." 3 words that hit Harry in a place no amount of training had armored. He kept that letter separate from the others. August disappeared in shopping. Diagon Alley was an experience. Poseidon took them, in his least ocean god-looking version of himself, and they entered through the leaky cauldron and stepped into the alley, and Harry stopped walking. Percy walked into him from behind. "Why are you, look at it," Harry said. Percy looked. Diagon Alley on a summer afternoon was color and noise and the smell of fresh parchment and something that might have been magical residue, a kind of charged quality in the air that was different from the charged quality of Camp Half-Blood, older, accumulated, like the alley itself had been saturated with magic for centuries and had stopped trying to hide it. Owls overhead. Cauldrons in windows. A sign that said Madame Malkin's robes for all occasions, and a line of children coming out of it in various states of fitting. Harry walked forward. He moved through the alley with his hands in his pockets and his eyes doing the thing where they went everywhere at once, the complete situational awareness that he developed at Privet Drive and refined at camp. He was cataloging. Filing. Building the picture he'd been building for a year out of library books. Gringotts was first, because money was practical, and Poseidon handled the Gringotts end of things with the brisk efficiency of a god who deals with treasure-hoarding beings on a regular professional basis. Harry had a vault, inherited from his parents, Lily and James Potter's assets preserved by magical will, that he hadn't known about, and the number on the balance sheet made him very still for a moment in the cool stone of the vault chamber. "This was theirs," he said. "Yes," Poseidon said. Harry looked at the gold in the vault. Not a lot by some standards, but real, and specific, accumulated by 2 people who had lived and worked and saved and then died at 21. He took what he needed for the school year. He left the rest, because the rest wasn't school supplies. It was something else. Ollivander's was last and strangest. The shop was narrow and quiet in the way of places that know they are important and don't need to prove it. Mr. Ollivander himself was a small man with silver eyes and the quality of absolute attention. He looked at you like he was measuring something that had nothing to do with physical dimensions. He looked at Harry and went briefly, completely still. "Harry Potter," he said. "Harry Jackson," Harry said. Ollivander held his gaze. "Of course," he said slowly. "Of course." Though the wand, he moved to his shelves, fast and specific, like a man who'd been thinking about this for years. "The wand will remember what it was made for. Regardless of the name." He pulled 3 wands. Harry tried them. The first 2 did nothing useful, a vase fell off a shelf, the room temperature dropped sharply, nothing that felt right. The third wand was holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches, and when Harry wrapped his hand around it the hum shifted, not the ocean hum but something adjacent to it, something that recognized him the way the water recognized him, something that said yes, this one, here. Warmth flooded his arm. Gold sparks showered from the tip. Ollivander watched. His expression was complex. "Curious," he said softly. "Very curious." "Why curious?" Harry asked. "That wand's brother," Ollivander said, "gave you that scar. The phoenix, fox, gave 2 feathers. 1 to your wand. 1 to the wand that killed your parents." He looked at the scar on Harry's forehead with the specific attention of someone reading text. Connected. From the very beginning. He paused. Though I don't think the connection means what it used to mean. You're different from what I expected. Everyone keeps saying that, Harry said, handing over the payment with the casual ease of someone who has already processed this piece of information and found it interesting rather than alarming. Percy's experience with the wand testing was brief because Percy didn't need a wand and told Ollivander so with cheerful directness, at which point Ollivander stared at him for a full 30 seconds and said, "What are you?" with genuine scientific curiosity, and Percy said, "Son of Poseidon," and Ollivander said, "Ah," and then went to a back shelf and came back with something wrapped in cloth. "Not a wand," Ollivander said. "But something that might be useful. It belonged to a demigod who came through this shop in 1943, I don't make a habit of stocking these, but it stayed, because things that belong somewhere tend to stay until their moment." He unwrapped it, a bronze ring, simply made, with a wave pattern etching. Celestial bronze and Olympian gold, bound together. Wouldn't do anything for a normal person. For you, Percy took it. It hummed, different from Harry's hum, but related, the family resemblance audible. "Huh," he said. He slipped it on. It fit exactly. "How much?" "No charge," Ollivander said, and looked at both of them with his measuring silver eyes. "I suspect I'll hear a great deal about both of you in the coming years. Consider it an investment in the narrative." September 1st arrived with the specific quality of mornings that know they're important. King's Cross was ordinary in all the ways train stations are ordinary, loud, crowded, smelling of diesel and takeaway coffee, and then platform 9 3/4 was not ordinary at all, and Harry walked through the barrier with Percy behind him and stopped on the other side and looked at the Hogwarts Express, red and enormous and breathing steam into the morning air. Percy said, "That's a train." "That's the train," Harry confirmed. They found a compartment. It was empty when they got to it and not empty shortly after, because the Weasley twins found them with the instinctive accuracy of people drawn to chaos. Fred and George Weasley were 12, red-haired, and operated as a single conversational unit that talked at twice the speed of a single person and twice the volume. "Harry Jackson," George said, dropping into the seat across, not a question. "The one they wrote about," Fred confirmed, settling next to his twin. "Well, the one they would have written about if anyone knew where you'd gone. There was a whole, what would you call it?" "A panic," George said. "In the wizarding world. When you disappeared. The boy who lived has vanished." "Very dramatic." "Very dramatic," Fred agreed. He looked at Percy. "And you are?" "Percy Jackson," Percy said. "His brother." "Don't ask about the logistics." "We weren't going to," George said, with the ease of people who have accepted that life comes with a lot of logistics that don't need explaining. "We were going to ask whether you play Quidditch." "What's Quidditch?" Percy said. The twins looked at each other. Then they looked at Percy with the particular expression of people who have just identified a project. "We have 6 hours on this train," Fred said. "We can work with 6 hours," George said. The compartment filled over the next hour. Ron Weasley appeared looking for his brothers, found them, stayed. Hermione Granger appeared looking for a toad belonging to a boy named Neville, found the toad, stayed longer because she recognized Harry and then recognized Percy and asked 3 questions before she'd sat down. Neville himself appeared looking for his toad, which Hermione had returned, and stayed because Neville had a quality of accidental permanence. He showed up and then was simply present, like a piece of furniture that turned out to be very comfortable. Harry watched all of this. He noted the way Hermione's eyes moved when she thought, quick, internal, the kind of thinking that happened faster than the words for it. He noted the way Ron watched Percy with the expression of someone trying to categorize something and finding the existing categories insufficient. He noted the way Neville sat slightly apart and watched everyone else with a gentle, self-effacing attention that was underestimating itself badly. "You're not what I expected," Hermione said to Harry, direct enough that it came out almost rude. What did you expect? Harry asked. The books about you, the children's books, the boy who lived series, they describe you as, she caught herself. Smaller. Thinner. More, I don't know the right word. Damaged? Harry said, without any particular emotion. Hermione flinched. I was going to say vulnerable. I know what you were going to say. He wasn't unkind about it. The books were written about where I was supposed to end up. Not where I actually ended up. He looked at her with the sea-colored eyes that did more work than people expected. What did you make of A History of Magic? Hermione blinked. You read it already? Over the summer. What did you make of the chapter on the Founders' conflicts? Slytherin's position on blood purity seems internally inconsistent with the chapter on ancient magic theory. If magic is inherited through lineage, and lineage is what gives it legitimacy, then the logic should support more magical lineages, not fewer. The exclusionary argument doesn't hold up on its own terms. Hermione stared at him. Percy, who had been explaining Quidditch misconceptions to Fred and George with increasingly incorrect information that the twins were gleefully not correcting, glanced over. He caught Harry's expression and grinned to himself. Harry had done this before, assessed a person by going straight to the intellectual level and seeing what they did with it. Hermione Granger, by the look of her face, was having the experience of finding an equal, which was very clearly something she had not had frequently. You're right, she said, slightly breathless. The internal logic doesn't work. I had the same thought, but I didn't know if I was missing something, if there was a historical context that justified. There isn't, Harry said. I checked the wizarding history section at Flourish and Blots. The blood purity argument has no coherent magical basis. It's a social hierarchy dressed up as magical theory. Yes, Hermione said emphatically. Then, I think we're going to be friends. I think so too, Harry said. Hogwarts appeared through the train window as dusk settled over Scotland, rising from the black loch like something built from concentrated intention rather than stone, turrets and towers and the warm glow of 1,000 windows, lit against the dark sky, enormous and ridiculous and completely, obviously real. Harry looked at it through the window and felt the same thing he'd felt stepping into Diagon Alley, that arrested stillness, that look at it. Percy looked at it beside him. Okay, Percy said, with the reverence of someone who has seen a lot of impressive things in his life and is choosing to give this one the respect it deserves. Okay, that's genuinely great. Yeah, Harry agreed. The boats across the lake were small and moved without oars, which Percy observed with professional interest and Harry observed with the specific attention of someone noting that the lake was large and deep and connected to things. He let his hand trail in the water. The lake breathed against his fingers, cold and old and full of something, kelpy, maybe, or something older, some deep water presence that acknowledged his touch the way the reservoir had, the way the Long Island Sound had. We know you, the water said, in the language of pressure and temperature. I know, Harry said back, in the same language. The sorting was in the Great Hall, which was enormous and magical and had an enchanted ceiling showing the September sky, and Harry stood in line with the other first years and thought less about which house he'd land in and more about the feel of the castle, because the castle had a feel, a specific texture to its magic, old stone saturated with a millennium of spellwork. He could feel the wards the way he felt wards at camp, and they were different, layered differently, but the principle was the same. He noted the teacher's table. Dumbledore, watching with his complicated blue eyes. McGonagall, sharp and attentive. A man in a turban who smelled wrong, or not wrong exactly, but doubled, like two things occupying the same space. Harry filed that away with a specific mental flag. The sorting hat came down over his head and went immediately, startlingly loud, well. Hello, Harry said, because it seemed polite. You're not what I usually find in here, the hat said. It didn't sound displeased. It sounded the way Ollivander had sounded, like a very old thing encountering something that required new categories. Two natures. Not mixed, layered. The magic on top and the other thing underneath, vast and old and much more dangerous than the magic. Both are mine, Harry said. Yes. Both are yours. Now. The hat thought. Harry could feel it thinking, really thinking, turning him over, looking at the angles. You could be Slytherin. That mind. That patience. The way you filed the teacher in the turban away for later, most 11-year-olds wouldn't have noticed. I noticed, Harry said. Yes. You also have the courage for Gryffindor, the loyalty for Hufflepuff, the hunger for knowledge of Ravenclaw. You're not missing anything, you're just concentrated. Another pause. But you're not asking me to put you where you'll be comfortable. You're asking me to put you where you'll be most effective. I'm asking you to put me where my mother was, Harry said, and it was the only thing he'd said with any particular feeling behind it. The hat was quiet for a long moment. Ah, it said softly. That's different. That's not strategy. No, Harry said. It isn't. Gryffindor, the hat shouted. The Gryffindor table erupted. Harry pulled the hat off his head and handed it to McGonagall, who was looking at him with an expression she was very carefully keeping neutral, and as he walked to the Gryffindor table he heard the hall, the other tables, the teachers, going through that ripple of recognition, name to face, Harry Potter, he's back, he's here, look at him, and it was loud and he understood it and it moved off him like water off stone. He sat. Fred and George dropped in on either side of him immediately, appearing from nowhere with the precision of people who had been holding their spots. Ron sat across from him, slightly pink with second-hand importance. Hermione, who had been sorted directly before Harry, moved down to make room. Percy's sorting was watched by the entire hall with rapt attention. The hat sat on Percy's head for nearly 5 minutes. Percy sat very still and then started having what was clearly an argument, because his jaw moved twice in the sharp way of someone making a point, and then the hat said, at considerable volume, I have never in 1,000 years had to invent a category but I will if you keep pushing, and then, in the normal announcement voice, Gryffindor. Percy dropped into the seat next to Harry. The hat called me categorically unprecedented, he said, with enormous satisfaction. What did you argue about? Harry asked. It wanted to put me in Slytherin because of the oceanic cunning, Percy said, making air quotes. I told it that was stereotyping. Harry stared at him. You argued with a magical hat about stereotyping. And won, Percy said. Harry turned back to the front of the hall. Dumbledore was watching them from the teacher's table with an expression that was extremely complex and contained, Harry suspected, equal parts relief, apprehension, and the specific exhaustion of a man who has just understood that the next 7 years are going to be nothing at all like he planned. Harry met his eyes across the hall. He didn't smile. He didn't perform anything. He just looked back, steady and present and entirely himself, and Dumbledore held his gaze for a moment and then inclined his head, very slightly, in something that was closer to acknowledgement than anything else. Noted, that nod said. I see you. Good, Harry said with his eyes. Now you know where we stand. The feast began. The great hall filled with noise and food and the particular chaos of 400 children being in one place, and Harry ate a proper dinner and talked with Hermione about magical theory and with the twins about Quidditch and let the castle settle around him the way the ocean settled around a diver, enormous, full of life, older than his arrival, already his. Under the noise and the candlelight and the enchanted ceiling showing a scatter of Scottish stars, the hum was there. Different from camp, different from the reservoir, different from Privet Drive's pipes. But the same underneath. The same note held by different instruments. Home, it said, in the specific way water has of saying it, not a sentiment, just a fact. A title, certain fact. Yeah, Harry thought back. I know. Chapter 4, Monsters in the Corridors. The man in the turban was lying about his name. Harry figured this out in the first week, not through anything dramatic, no confrontation, no revelation, just the slow accumulation of small observations that didn't add up. Professor Quirrell smelled wrong in the specific way of something doubled, the same quality Harry had noted at the sorting, and it got stronger when Quirrell was nervous, which was often. In defense against the dark arts, Quirrell's hands shook when he wrote on the board. He fumbled simple spells. He stammered through explanations of creatures he should have known cold. But occasionally, in an unguarded moment, when Quirrell thought nobody was watching, the stammer stopped. The hands steadied. Something moved behind the watery eyes that was not nervous or fumbling or half-competent. Something that had very old, very patient intelligence, and was doing exactly what Harry was doing, watching and filing and waiting. Harry mentioned it to Percy on the third night, in their dormitory after Ron and Neville were asleep. "Quirrell," Harry said quietly. "I know," Percy said, from across the room. He'd been awake too, which was not a coincidence. "Something's living in him." "Living in him," Harry repeated. "That's an interesting way to say it." "At camp we had a case where a nature spirit got forced out of its tree and tried to inhabit a person," Percy said. "Different energy, but the structural thing, something that doesn't have a body borrowing one that does, that's what it feels like." He paused. "It's not a spirit though, is it?" "No," Harry said. "I think it's Voldemort." The word sat in the dark dormitory. Ron muttered in his sleep and turned over. Outside, the Scottish autumn wind moved against the castle walls and the castle absorbed it, as it absorbed everything, with the patience of very old stone. "Voldemort," Percy said. Flat. "Assessing." "The Dark Lord." "The one the prophecy, I know who he is," Percy said. "I'm thinking about what we do about it." "Watch," Harry said. "For now. I want to understand what he's here for before I do anything." Percy was quiet for a moment. Then, "Okay. But the second it becomes actively dangerous, I will handle it," Harry said. "We will handle it," Percy said. "We will handle it," Harry agreed. They watched Quirrell. The castle itself helped, in the way that old places do when they've decided you belong in them. Hogwarts was not a passive structure. Harry had understood this from the first night, when a staircase had rearranged itself to shorten his path to the dormitory and the castle felt like it had made a choice. The portraits talked, the ghosts drifted with specific purpose, and the building itself seemed to breathe differently at night, deeper, more present, as though it was more fully itself in the dark. Harry found he could navigate it without a map within 2 weeks, which drew looks from other students who'd been there for years. The truth was that he followed the feel of the stone, the way the magic ran through the walls like water through pipes, and the water in those pipes answered him, and the answer told him where everything was. He couldn't have explained it concisely and didn't try. Hermione noticed, because Hermione noticed everything. She stopped him on a Wednesday afternoon outside the Charms corridor. "You never get lost," she said. "Even in the parts where the corridors move." "The castle tells me where things are," Harry said. Hermione opened her mouth, closed it, thought about this seriously. "Is that a wizard thing or a—" she gestured vaguely in the direction of not wizard. "I don't know," Harry said honestly. "Probably both." Hermione had spent the first week trying to categorize the ways Harry was different from the Harry Potter the children's books had described, which was apparently different enough that she'd dedicated a notebook to it. Harry knew about the notebook because she wasn't particularly subtle, and also because Percy had read over her shoulder during History of Magic and reported back. Harry found it more amusing than anything else. The classes were interesting. Charms was genuinely interesting, the kind of thing Harry engaged with the way he engaged with strategy, understand the principle, find the most direct application, execute cleanly. Flitwick was delighted by him in the way of a man who enjoys students who understand things rather than perform understanding. Potions was a different kind of interesting. Snape was a closed room, and Harry understood closed rooms. He had lived in them, been locked in them, built them himself. He recognized in Snape the specific quality of someone who has organized his entire personality as a defensive structure, the contempt that kept people at a distance, the precision that gave nothing away, the eyes that recorded everything from behind a wall of deliberate unpleasantness. Harry didn't dislike him. He found him intensely legible in ways Snape probably didn't intend. What Harry didn't anticipate was the first potions class. Snape swept in, black robes, dungeon atmosphere, the whole production. Harry had been warned about this by the Weasley twins, who had provided a dramatic reenactment during breakfast that was extremely detailed. Snape began the lecture, moved through it with the cutting efficiency of someone who is simultaneously teaching and maintaining a performance, and then stopped in front of Harry's workstation with the specific stillness of a man who has been waiting for this moment. "Potter," Snape said. "Jackson," Harry said. The correction landed in the silent dungeon classroom like a stone in water. Every student stopped breathing. Snape held Harry's gaze and something moved through his black eyes, surprise, recalculation, and underneath both, something older and more complex. "What," Snape said, very quietly, "do I get if I add powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" "Draught of living death," Harry said. "It's a sleeping draught. The combination produces the primary sedative compound. The asphodel provides the binding agent and the wormwood intensifies it by a factor of roughly 3, which is why the dosage regulation is critical. A small surplus puts the subject into a coma rather than sleep." Snape stared at him. "I read the textbook," Harry said. "All of it. Over the summer." A pause. "And where would you find a bezoar?" "Stomach of a goat. It's a calcified mass, acts as a general magical antidote because the calcification process binds magical toxins. Effective against most basic poisons, less effective against compound curses." Harry paused. "Though you can potentiate it by dissolving a small amount in a Dittany solution before administration. The Dittany opens the binding sites." Snape's expression had gone through several things. He settled on, "That is not in the first-year textbook." "No," Harry agreed. "It's in Advanced Potion Making, Chapter 14. I found a copy at Flourish and Blots." The dungeon was completely silent. Hermione, 3 seats over, had the expression of someone watching something they wish they'd done first. Percy, next to Harry, was looking at the ceiling with the expression of someone who is very deliberately not making a face. Snape held Harry's gaze for a long moment. Whatever he found there wasn't what he'd been expecting and clearly required a revised approach. He turned away and continued the class, and if his manner toward Harry for the rest of the lesson was slightly less cutting than it might otherwise have been, nobody mentioned it. "After class, in the corridor, you knew all of that before the lesson," Percy said. "Yes," Harry said. "You could have let him finish the questions." "I could have." "Why didn't you?" Harry considered. "Because he was going to use it to establish something. About James Potter's son. About how I measure up or don't. I didn't want to let him set the terms." Percy looked at him. "You're 10 years old and you just outmaneuvered a professor's psychological setup on the first day." "I grew up with the Dursleys," Harry said. "Reading power structures is a survival skill." Percy didn't say anything for a moment. "Then, I keep forgetting that about you." "What?" "That you were actually," he stopped. "That it was real." "What happened there?" "Not just a thing that happened before the good parts." He said it carefully, with the precision of someone who has thought about how to say something for a while. "That it's still in you." Harry shrugged. "It made me better at some things." "It shouldn't have had to," Percy said. Harry looked at him sideways. "No," he said. "It shouldn't have. And then, come on, we'll be late for Transfiguration." October brought the troll. Not directly, the troll was preceded by Halloween, by a feast, by the specific atmospheric build-up of a holiday that a very old castle knows how to celebrate. Harry and Percy were at the Gryffindor table with the comfortable architecture of the last 2 months' friendships around them, Hermione arguing with Ron about the correct way to perform the Wingardium Leviosa motion, Fred and George plotting something they were being unusually quiet about, Neville carefully stabilizing a pile of food on his plate with the focused attention of someone who has learned to approach physical challenges methodically since discovering, at camp level this year, that he had a startling gift for magical plants. Quirrell burst through the great hall doors at a dead run and collapsed against the door frame and screamed, "Troll, in the dungeons, thought you ought to know," and then, for theatrical effect, fainted. The hall exploded into panic. Harry watched Quirrell faint and made a note. The feint was performed, not poorly performed, but performed, the body going down too deliberately, the eyes closing at the right moment. Something that did not want to be in the room when the troll caused its chaos. Dumbledore's voice cut through the noise, prefects directed students toward their dormitories, and Harry turned to Percy. "Hermione," he said. Percy was already standing. "She went to the bathroom before the feast ended. She doesn't know." They were moving before Ron had finished saying "Where are you going?" which meant Ron came with them because Ron was fundamentally the kind of person who followed movement in a crisis. The girls' bathroom on the second floor. Harry could hear the troll from 2 corridors away. 12 feet of mountain troll moved with the specific ground-shaking confidence of something that has no natural predators and knows it, and it smelled like something had died inside something else that had then died inside a swamp. Harry pushed the bathroom door open. The troll was in the room. Hermione was backed into the corner between the sinks and the wall, frozen with her arms up, which was the wrong instinct. Raised arms meant staying still, but understandable for a first encounter. The troll hadn't swung yet. It was doing the thing they did, the brief predator assessment, deciding whether this was interesting enough to hit. Harry said, "Hey." The troll turned. It looked at him with the small red eyes that mountain trolls used for everything: threat assessment, interest assessment, lunch assessment, and Harry looked back at it without any of the things that trigger a troll charge. No panic, no high-pitched noise, no sudden movement. Just the still, present quality that he'd first found in a bathtub and refined in the park and sharpened to a specific edge over 2 months of a castle that recognized him. The troll blinked. Percy stepped in beside Harry, and the two of them stood in the bathroom doorway, and the troll blinked again. Something in its hindbrain, which was most of its brain, tried to categorize them and ran into the problem that they didn't categorize correctly. Didn't smell like prey. Didn't move like prey. "Percy," Harry said, quietly. "On it," Percy said. There was a row of sinks. The water in the pipes behind those sinks was connected, as all water was connected, as Harry had understood from the beginning, to the castle's plumbing, which was old and extensive and had been answering Harry since the first night. Percy put his hand on the nearest sink, and Harry didn't look at the water, he just reached, the way you reach for something that's already yours. Every sink in the bathroom turned on at once. Full pressure, hot and cold together, and the water didn't fall. It rose. The troll's eyes tracked the movement. It had the instinct, they all did, to watch the unexpected thing, and in the moment of distraction Percy moved, fast and certain, and went low, under the reach of the club, and came up behind the troll's knee and hit it in the specific spot that had taken him 2 years to identify on things twice his size. The troll went down on one knee. The club hit the floor and cracked 3 tiles. Harry was already in front of Hermione. "Can you move?" "Yes," Hermione said, slightly high-pitched but functional. She moved. "Window," Harry told Percy, who was currently on the troll's back, which was not where Harry would have chosen to be, but Percy had his own methods. Percy made a specific gesture with one hand, sharp, pushing, and the water Harry had raised from the sinks hit the troll in the face simultaneously. The troll lurched. Percy rode the lurch with the balance of someone who has surfed actual waves, came off the troll's back clean, landed on the wet floor, and grabbed the club on the way up. "Got it," Percy said. The troll got up. It was furious now, the small eyes red and focused, swinging toward Percy with the full weight of 12 feet and several hundred pounds of mountain troll commitment. Harry looked at the puddles on the bathroom floor. The water the sinks had poured out, standing an inch deep, spreading everywhere. He thought about the reservoir column, about the practiced authority of something that was already his, and he raised his hand and the water came up, not a column, not a wave, but a sheet, a moving wall of it, cold and precise and deliberate. It hit the troll like a wall, because it was a wall, and 12 feet of mountain troll moving at speed does not fare well when something solid and liquid and completely indifferent to its momentum stops it dead. The troll sat down in the puddle. It sat there, looking at Harry, wet and confused, with the specific expression of a creature that has just encountered something that doesn't fit its existing model of how the world works. Harry pointed at the door. "Out," he said, with the full weight of the thing behind his eyes, the thing Percy had called oceanic and Poseidon had called authority over living things near water. The troll got up. It moved past him, giving him a wide berth, and went out the bathroom door. They stood in the wet bathroom, Harry, Percy, Hermione, Ron, in the silence after, with the pipe still dripping from the open taps and 3 cracked tiles and a club on the floor and all 4 of them breathing differently than they had been a minute ago. Ron said, "Did you just tell the troll to leave and it left?" "Yes," Harry said. Ron pointed at Percy. "And you wrote it?" "Briefly," Percy said, inspecting a scrape on his forearm with professional detachment. Ron looked at Hermione. Hermione looked back at Ron. They both looked at Harry and Percy, and the specific recalibration happening on both their faces was almost identical, the moment of understanding that the people you've been sitting next to at breakfast for 2 months are something other than what you'd initially processed them as. Hermione said, "That was not standard first-year defensive magic." "No," Harry agreed. "What was the water thing?" "That's not a wand-based effect. I didn't see you cast anything. You didn't use the incantation for Aguamenti, and even if you had, Aguamenti doesn't produce that volume or that." "Hermione," Harry said. "What? Are you okay?" She stopped. She processed this, the troll, the bathroom, the corner she'd been backed into, and her face did something briefly, honestly young, the expression underneath the competence. "I was scared," she said. "I was very scared." "That's fine," Harry said. "Being scared is fine." "I didn't know what to do," she said, with the specific distress of someone for whom not knowing what to do is a particularly personal failure. "Now you do," Percy said cheerfully. "Get behind Harry. Alternatively, get behind me. Alternatively, if neither of us is available, do the thing where you throw something at its face and run. Its eyes are its weakest point, its vision isn't great even without obstruction." Hermione stared at him. "How do you know that?" "I've dealt with worse than trolls," Percy said. "Like what?" Percy thought about it. "Minotaur. Medusa. A hydra, which was genuinely terrible. Cyclopes, plural, you're 11, Ron said. "I started young," Percy said. McGonagall arrived with Snape and Quirrell, all 3 of them ready for an emergency. They found 4 children standing in a wet bathroom with a cracked troll club on the floor and no troll in evidence. McGonagall's voice went through several registers before settling on the controlled tone she used when something had exceeded her ability to be simply outraged and had moved into the territory of requiring full professional processing. "Explain," she said. "We came to find Hermione because she didn't know about the troll," Ron said, which was true, and also, Harry had noticed, a piece of information that redirected the question away from what exactly had happened to the troll. "And the troll?" McGonagall said. "We suggested it leave," Harry said. McGonagall looked at Harry. Snape looked at Harry. Quirrell, standing slightly apart, was looking at Harry with the doubled quality, and it was stronger now, sharpened, like whatever lived in Quirrell's head was paying very specific attention. Harry looked back at Quirrell and held his gaze for one precise moment and let the thing behind his eyes be visible. Not a threat. Not a display. Just, "I know you're in there." Something flickered in Quirrell's expression. Gone instantly, perfectly concealed. But it had been there. 10 points to Gryffindor, McGonagall said finally, in the tone of someone awarding points under protest, for dealing with a dangerous creature. And 10 points each from Jackson and Jackson for leaving the dormitory during lockdown. They cancel out. Go to bed. Which Jackson? Percy asked. McGonagall gave him a look that ended the question. November sharpened to cold and the Quidditch season opened with Harry on the Gryffindor team as Seeker, which had happened because Flitwick had mentioned Harry's reflexes to McGonagall, who had appeared at breakfast one morning and said, "Pitch." After dinner, and Harry had gone to the pitch after dinner and McGonagall had thrown something at his head without warning and he'd caught it left-handed 12 inches from his face without thinking. Clean, McGonagall had said, and that was apparently the whole tryout. Percy was in the stands for the first match, Gryffindor versus Slytherin, with Hermione and Ron and Neville and the Weasley twins, the latter of whom were beaters and had made it their personal mission to ensure Harry's first match went well by the method of hitting bludgers at every Slytherin player in range with focused enthusiasm. The match was Gryffindor's in 32 minutes, which was fast even by house standards. Harry caught the snitch at minute 30, which he managed not because he was the fastest on the pitch. The Slytherin seeker Marcus Flint was older and heavier on a better broom, but because he'd watched the pattern of the snitch for the first 20 minutes and understood that it moved in a logarithmic spiral relative to the center point of the pitch, expanding outward, and intercepting it at the spiral's expansion point was more efficient than chasing it directly. He rolled off his broom in the post-match chaos with the snitch in his fist and found Percy in the stands already moving toward him, wearing the expression of someone who has been doing intense math on his behalf for 32 minutes. Logarithmic spiral, Percy said. Logarithmic spiral, Harry confirmed. That's, Percy started. Don't say it's interesting, Harry said. I know it's interesting. I was going to say terrifying, Percy said. In a complimentary way. What Harry didn't mention, not to Percy, not to anyone, was that his broom had tried to throw him at minute 7. He'd felt it the moment the match started, a subtle wrongness in the way the broom responded, slightly too much resistance in one direction, slightly too eager in another. Not a malfunction. Deliberate. Something or someone had interfered with the enchantment. He'd corrected for it manually, which was doable, and he'd identified the moment it started and stopped and correlated it with Quirrell's position in the stands. He added this to the file. December came, and with it the descent toward the end of term and a specific restlessness, the castle getting quieter as students went home for Christmas, the corridors emptying, the atmosphere shifting from the collective energy of 400 people to the smaller, more intimate weight of those who stayed. Harry and Percy stayed. Ron stayed, and Hermione, and Neville, who went home briefly and came back within a week because his grandmother had a cold and didn't want company. The morning of Christmas, Harry came downstairs to find presents at the foot of his bed. Real ones, not Dudley's cast-offs, not the single slightly damp package Petunia had occasionally left on the kitchen table as a legal minimum. An actual pile. Percy's was largest and had been wrapped with the enthusiasm of someone who does not care about precision, a new set of training bracers from the camp armory, celestial bronze reinforced. Sally had sent blue cookies and a letter that took 10 minutes to read and made Harry sit on the edge of his bed very still afterward. Hermione had sent a book, Magical Theory, a unified history, the kind that actually addressed the foundations rather than the standard curriculum. Ron had sent a slightly misshapen fudge in the shape of a quaffle. The last package was small, and the card had no name, and when Harry opened it the smell hit him first, salt and deep water and the specific aliveness of the ocean, and inside was a compass. Bronze, old, Olympian made by the look of it, with the needle pointing in a direction that had nothing to do with north. He turned it in his hands. The needle tracked something else, some other orientation. A direction that felt, when he held it, like home. There was no note. There didn't need to be. Percy looked over and saw it and didn't say anything for a moment. Then, he remembered. Yeah, Harry said. He got me one last year, Percy said. Mine points toward the camp. Harry looked at his compass. Mine points, he rotated. The needle swung. Different. Percy looked at it. It's not pointing at camp. No. Where is it pointing? Harry sat with the compass in his hands and thought about everything that had happened since July, the train, the sorting, Quirrell's doubling, the troll in the bathroom, the broom at the Quidditch match, the smell of something building in the castle, the specific patient intelligence that lived in a professor's head and was waiting for something. He thought about what it was waiting for. Down, Harry said quietly. Percy looked at him. There's something in this castle, Harry said. Something being guarded. Something Quirrell, something Voldemort wants. He looked at the compass. It's been pointing down since I got here. I assumed it was pointing at the lock. But it's not. He paused. It's pointing at a specific floor. Percy was very still. The third-floor corridor. The locked one. That Dumbledore told everyone specifically not to go to, Harry said. Which means everyone knows about it, Percy said. Which means Voldemort knows about it, Harry said. Which means if Quirrell makes a move, we'll know where he's going. Percy looked at Harry with the expression of someone performing a rapid risk assessment against the recommendation of his better judgment and coming up short. So we're going to wait and then follow a possessed professor into the one part of the school explicitly designated as dangerous. That was my thinking, Harry said. Percy was quiet for a moment. Should we tell Dumbledore? I tried, Harry said. I sent an owl in November. I said there was something wrong with Quirrell and someone should look at him. Percy blinked. What did Dumbledore say? He said Professor Quirrell was dealing with a personal matter and that my concern was noted and admirable. Harry put the compass down. He's not going to move against Quirrell until Quirrell moves first. He's playing a longer game. What game? I don't know yet, Harry said. But it involves me specifically. I think Dumbledore wants to see what I do. Percy stared at him. You think Dumbledore is using the situation to test you? I think Dumbledore is doing several things at once and one of them is that, yes. Harry picked the compass back up. He left the stone in the school. He built the defenses around it. But he was very conspicuously away when Quirrell made his first move at the Quidditch match. He looked at Percy. He wanted to see what I'd do. He's been watching us all term. Percy sat back. He had the expression he got when a situation had resolved itself into something that required a decision. Okay, he said. So when it happens, Harry said, we don't wait for permission. January and February and March slid past in the rhythm of the castle's year. The compass held steady. Quirrell grew more strained, the doubling more pronounced, the specific quality of two intelligences sharing one body, one frightened, one patient, becoming harder to conceal. Harry watched. Percy watched. They told Hermione at the end of March, which resulted in a 3-hour interrogation during which she went through every theory they developed and either confirmed, expanded, or productively challenged each one. The Philosopher's Stone, she said, when they got to the part about what was being guarded. I found a reference in Notable Magical Discoveries of the 20th Century, Nicholas Flamel, the stone produces the elixir of life. Immortality, or near enough. She looked at Harry. If Voldemort is trying to return to a body, he needs it, Harry said. Yes. Then the timeline matters, she said. He can't wait indefinitely, whatever he is right now, sharing a body, he's diminished. He'll make his move before the end of term. She was right. He made his move in June. Chapter 5, The Sea remembers the night Quirrell moved, the compass went north. Harry woke at 2 in the morning with the needle spinning, not the steady downward pull it had maintained all year, but a sharp, decisive rotation to north-northwest, and then it stopped. Pointed. He was out of bed before Percy said anything, and Percy was already sitting up, which meant Percy had felt something too, not the compass, but the castle. The way it breathed differently when something was wrong. "Now?" Percy said. "Now," Harry said. They dressed in under a minute. Harry pocketed the compass. Percy had his ring on already, he slept with it on, a habit from camp, and in the corridor outside the dormitory Hermione was standing with a lit wand and a look that said she had been waiting. "I heard you get up," she said, before anyone could ask. "You don't have to come," Harry said. "I know," she said, and moved toward the third-floor corridor. They went down through the castle the way Harry navigated all of it, following the water in the walls. It was agitated tonight, moving faster than it should through the pipes, the castle itself responding to whatever was happening below. The third-floor corridor door was open when they got there. Not broken open, not forced, unlocked and ajar, like an invitation. "He did that on purpose," Percy said. "Not Quirrell," Harry said. "Dumbledore. He pushed the door fully open. He's letting this happen." "Why would he let this happen?" Hermione said. "Because he wants Voldemort to reach the stone," Harry said, moving through the door. "Or he wants someone to stop Voldemort from reaching the stone. Either way, it ends tonight. He wants it ended." "Then why isn't he here?" Hermione said, following. "Because he needs it to look like it was me," Harry said. "He left. He was conspicuously absent. When it's over, he comes back and finds what happened and the story writes itself." He said it without anger. It was just the map of the situation, read clearly. He's not wrong that it needs to end. He's just managing it from a distance. "That's incredibly manipulative," Hermione said. "Yes," Harry agreed. "He's also the most effective wizard alive and genuinely believes this is the best way to protect the school and defeat Voldemort, which makes it complicated rather than simple." He looked at her. "We can discuss the ethics of Dumbledore's methodology later. Right now, the room beyond the door introduced itself. The three-headed dog was enormous in the way that only magical creatures can be enormous, beyond the scale of natural dogs, beyond what should be structurally possible, with 3 heads that turned independently and 6 eyes and a smell that was the specific overwhelming reality of very large predator. It was also asleep. All 3 heads were down, which was the second piece of information, and under the nearest head was a harp that was still playing faintly, the enchantment wearing thin. Harry looked at the dog. The dog, with whatever sleeping awareness a 3-headed animal maintains, looked back at Harry with something in its eyes that was not quite recognition and was not quite not recognition. He reached for the water in the room. There wasn't much, just the damp of stone, the moisture in old wood, the breath of sleeping animal. He didn't need much. Just enough. He let the hum come forward, not the wave version, not the combat version, the one that sat at the frequency of living things near water. "Stay," he said with it. Not a word. A pressure. The frequency of something vast and patient that has never once needed to shout. All 3 had settled deeper into sleep. "Through the trapdoor," Harry said, and moved. The trapdoor dropped them into Devil's Snare, which thrashed and grabbed with the cheerful enthusiasm of a plant that has been given one job and is doing it with commitment. Hermione had her wand out and a Lumos Maxima cast before Harry had identified what they'd landed in, which bathed the plant in enough light to make it recoil immediately, which bought the 2 seconds Harry needed to pull Percy free from a particularly aggressive vine. "Thanks," Percy said. "The next room," Hermione said, already moving. "The keys." Hundreds of enchanted keys whirling through a giant, dark, stone space, and one of them, old, silver, broken feathered, was the right one, and among the brooms that sat on the stone floor Harry's was the right one for reaching it. He was on the broom before anyone else had worked out the problem, and he found the key in 40 seconds by the same mathematical principle he'd used to find the snitch, and he came back down and had the door open in under a minute. "Show off," Percy said. "Efficient," Harry said. The giant chess set was the room after, and the room after that, and each defense made more sense as a system, not designed to stop someone determined, designed to slow someone down, to cost them time and effort, to ensure that by the time they reached the end they were depleted. It was good design. It was the design of someone who understood that a sufficiently powerful wizard would get through, and had built the path to ensure the getting through had a cost. The chess set required sacrifice. Harry saw it in the first 30 seconds, the board was unwinnable by conventional approach, the black pieces too well positioned, too mobile. You'd have to trade major pieces to break through. Percy looked at the board and then looked at Harry with the specific expression of someone who has played enough games in his life to know when a game is actually about something else. It's a psychological test, Percy said. It wants to know if you'll sacrifice something important to win. Yes, Harry said. What do we sacrifice? Harry looked at the board for a long moment. He moved to one of the pieces, a knight, and put his hand on it. The stone was cold and faintly alive, the magic in it warm. Ron would sacrifice himself here, he said, not as a statement about Ron specifically but about the shape of the problem. This was a room designed to see if the person solving it had a particular kind of courage, the noble self-sacrificing kind. That's what it's looking for. And we're not doing that, Percy said. We're not doing that, Harry agreed. He looked at the board. He looked at it differently, not as a chess game but as a magic problem, as a system with rules, and those rules had edges. Hermione. Already looking, she said, wand out, running detection spells along the edges of the board. She paused. The boundary enchantment. The board is defined by a specific space, it only operates within the marked squares. If you remove a piece from the active enchantment field entirely, it stops being a piece, Percy said. It stops being bound, Hermione corrected, with precision. It becomes just stone. The board can't control stone that isn't participating. Harry looked at the knight under his hand. He looked at the edge of the board. He picked the knight up, it resisted, the magic tugging, but not against someone who had been working against magical resistance for 3 years, and walked it to the edge of the marked boundary and set it down outside. The board shuddered. The Black Queen turned, located the anomaly, and found that there was nothing to respond to. The piece wasn't on the board anymore, technically, wasn't subject to the rules. The Queen froze. The whole board froze, 3 seconds of magical recalculation, and in those 3 seconds Harry walked across the board, stepping only on squares that the frozen black pieces were turned away from, with the specific route finding that Hogwarts had been sharpening in him all year. He made it across in 8 moves. Percy and Hermione followed his exact path. None of the pieces moved until they were through the door on the other side, at which point the board went through a delayed spasm of confusion and the door clicked shut. That was not the intended solution, Hermione said. No, Harry agreed. But it worked. The troll room they walked through quickly because the troll was already unconscious. Quirrell had come this way and had handled it less elegantly, by the look of the stone wall. Then Snape's potions challenge, 7 bottles, a logic puzzle in flame, one that let you go forward, one that took you back. Hermione read it in 60 seconds and identified the solution with the absolute confidence of someone who has never once doubted her capacity for logical problems. This bottle, she said, pointing. Harry picked it up. It was cold and held no particular magic, potion, not enchantment, no secondary protection. You two take the one that goes back, he said. Get out. Get Dumbledore, or McGonagall, someone. We're not going back, Percy said immediately. Percy. Tell me specifically why you want us to go back, Percy said, with the flat, unmovable quality he used when a decision was already made and argument was just going to be a waste of time. Harry looked at him. Because what's ahead of this is Voldemort. He's disembodied, he's parasitic, and the specific way he kills people is with a curse that is designed to negate protection. If he uses it on me, I have a chance because of my mother's sacrifice and possibly because of what I am. If he uses it on you, my father is a god, Percy said. Poseidon is not here. Neither is the entirety of the ocean, but that's never stopped me. Percy crossed his arms. I've fought things that make Voldemort look like a school project, Harry. I fought the Minotaur when I was 12. I'm not going back. Harry looked at Hermione. Hermione said, "Don't look at me. I'm the one who solved the puzzle. I'm clearly an asset." Harry stood in the doorway between the potion room and whatever was beyond it and held his brother's gaze for a long moment. He thought about the compass. He thought about the Christmas morning and the blue cookies at midnight and the park in the early mornings, the reservoir columns, the way Percy had stepped in front of him in every situation all year, the same way Harry had stepped in front of Hermione with the troll, the reflexive, unthought, complete willingness. "Okay," Harry said. "Stay behind me unless I say otherwise." "Naturally," Percy said. They drank the potion and went through the black flame. The final chamber was underground in the way of places that have never been above ground, that were carved specifically for darkness, low ceiling, rough walls, torches that lit when they entered with the specific magical courtesy of a space that was designed to be witnessed. The mirror of Ariste was in the center, tall and elaborate, its frame carved with words Harry could read now because he'd looked them up in October. Ariste stra eru oit ube kafru oit on wosi, I show not your face but your heart's desire. Quirrell was standing in front of it. He turned when they entered, and the stammer was gone completely, and the doubled quality had resolved into something singular and sharp. The part of Quirrell that was still Quirrell pushed entirely to the back, and what looked out through the watery eyes was old and cold and very, very patient. "Harry Potter," Quirrell said. His voice was different without the stammer, smooth, precise, the voice of a man who had once been brilliant and had traded everything for a specific kind of power. "Jackson," Harry said. Quirrell's mouth curved slightly. "Not warmly. A name can be changed. A destiny less so." He looked at Harry with the assessing quality of something that has been thinking about this moment for a long time. "You're not what I expected." "Everyone says that," Harry said. "You're stronger than the prophecy suggested." Quirrell tilted his head, studying him. "The divine element, Poseidon's blood. I didn't account for that. Dumbledore didn't tell me, and my sources in the wizarding world were limited these last years." The smoothness in his voice had a quality Harry identified as genuine intellectual curiosity, not performed, not manipulative, just the actual interest of a very intelligent mind encountering new information. "Do you know what you are?" "Yes," Harry said. "Then you know what I am?" "Voldemort," Harry said. "Reduced. Parasitic. Waiting for a body." Something moved in the borrowed eyes, sharpness, and underneath the sharpness, for a fraction of a moment, something old and bare. "Waiting has its advantages," Quirrell said. "One learns a great deal about the nature of power when one has been stripped of everything but the desire for it." He gestured at the mirror. "I've been standing in front of this for 20 minutes. I can see myself holding the stone. I can see it clearly. And I cannot reach it." He looked at Harry. "The mirror shows your heart's desire. And my desire and my ability remain uncoupled. The mirror knows I don't truly want the stone for its own sake. I want what it represents." He paused. "Whereas I'm not going to help you get the stone," Harry said. "No," Quirrell said, and his hand moved, and the wand was out and the spell was silent and fast, not Avada Kedavra, something else, a binding curse, layered and powerful, designed to hold something stronger than a normal first year. Harry stepped sideways. Not with any special ability, just the camp-trained reflex that Percy had spent 2 years drilling into him, the step that takes you off the line of attack rather than through it. The curse hit the wall and the wall cracked. "You moved," Quirrell said, with something that was almost appreciation. "I've been doing this for 4 years," Harry said. Quirrell cast again, 3 spells in fast succession, which was technically impressive, the work of a powerful caster even in a borrowed and deteriorating body. Harry moved through all 3, the footwork natural and continuous, not frantic. Percy was already moving to the left flank, which was the correct response, splitting the target, the basic strategy from a dozen Camp War games. Quirrell tracked Percy and the mistake was there. Harry moved. The distance closed in 2 steps and he put his hand on Quirrell's arm. The effect was immediate and catastrophic from Quirrell's perspective. Where Harry's hand touched the borrowed skin, the reaction was the same one that had protected him at age 1, Lily's sacrifice, the love magic that lived in his blood, but it was something else now too, layered over and through it, the specific quality of Poseidon's blood, the ocean that does not accommodate things that have no right to be in it. The two forces together were not additive. They were something else. Quirrell screamed. The skin where Harry touched it cracked, not like stone cracking but like the surface of ice cracking when the water beneath it moves. The crack spread up Quirrell's arm, and Quirrell's scream rose, and the turban began to unravel, not from any deliberate action but from the simple structural failure of a vessel whose inhabitant was trying to flee. Harry didn't let go. He held on the way he'd held the column of water at the reservoir, not forcing it, not fighting it, just being present, letting his nature be what it was. The ocean doesn't argue with foreign things in it. It simply is the ocean, and foreign things don't survive. Harry. Percy's voice, sharp. Something's coming out of him. The turban fell. The back of Quirrell's head turned. Harry had been told. He'd read the theory, he'd built the picture, he'd thought he was prepared. Nothing quite prepared you for looking at the face on the back of someone's head, chalk white, noseless, with eyes the color of open wounds and the specific, terrible quality of intelligence and hatred so completely fused that they'd become indistinguishable. Voldemort looked at Harry with those red eyes, and Harry looked back. Remarkable, Voldemort said, through Quirrell's stolen mouth. His voice was a whisper but it carried, the way very quiet things carry in very quiet places. The son of Poseidon. And Lily's boy. Something moved in the red eyes that was not quite emotion but was the ghost of where emotion used to be. She burned, you know. When I killed her. The love she'd built. It burned me. He paused. What you're doing now burns too. But differently. You burn like the sea burns. Like the sea burns, Harry said. Cold and complete, Voldemort said. Without malice. The ocean doesn't hate what it drowns. It simply drowns it. The red eyes studied him. You're not afraid of me. No, Harry said. Why not? Because you're half a face on the back of a dying man's head, Harry said. And I've fought things with more substance than this. Quirrell's body convulsed. Harry felt the moment it began to fail beneath his hands, felt the structural collapse, the borrowed vessel losing coherence as its occupant fought to preserve itself by fleeing. He had maybe 30 seconds. The stone, Voldemort said, and his voice had changed, stripped of the smooth intellectualism, something rawer underneath. Give me the stone and I'll tell you things. Things about your mother. About what she was. The red eyes burned. About what you were supposed to be before a god interfered. Harry looked at him. He thought about that. He thought about what it cost Voldemort to offer rather than demand, a man who had spent 50 years taking what he wanted by force, reduced to bargaining with an 11-year-old in an underground chamber. No, Harry said. I can give you power, I have power, Harry said. I can give you knowledge, I'll find it myself, Harry said. I usually do. He pushed. Not with his hands, the hands were already doing their work, the burning contact maintained. He pushed with the thing underneath, the vast and patient thing that the reservoir and the Long Island Sound and the pipes at Privet Drive had all been whispering to him for years. He pushed the way the ocean pushes, not aggressively, not with anger, with the simple, irresistible pressure of something that takes up a great deal of space and has been here considerably longer than whatever is currently resisting it. Voldemort came out of Quirrell. Not dramatically, not a battle, not an explosion. The way a tide takes something that doesn't belong on the shore and draws it back. The dark wisp of what Voldemort was tore loose from Quirrell's failing body and hit Harry's presence and could not pass through it, could not enter it, could not stay near it, and screamed, a soundless, sourceless scream that every person in the castle felt as a pressure change, like the moment before a thunderstorm when the whole world goes still, and then it was gone. Through the wall. Through the stone. Somewhere far and dark, further than here. Quirrell's body fell. Harry stood over it and breathed, and his hands were fine. No burning, no damage. Percy was at his shoulder in the same instant, hand on Harry's arm, warm and solid and real, and Hermione was at his other side, and the three of them stood in the underground chamber with a dead man on the floor and torches burning quietly and the mirror of Ariste showing Harry something he didn't look at directly. He looked at it sideways, the way you look at things that are too bright for straight on. The mirror showed him, not Lily, not James, not Poseidon. It showed him something small and specific, a table. A kitchen table. Blue cookies on a plate. Sally's handwriting on a note on the counter. Percy with his inside-out shirt and his impossible hair. The compass on the windowsill. Number 104, not number 4. Home by choice rather than imprisonment. He looked away. The stone, Hermione said. Practical, urgent, already moving forward. It should still be, in the mirror, Harry said. He moved toward it. He looked at the mirror directly now, at his own reflection, at the family around the kitchen table, at the thing his heart apparently wanted so straightforwardly that even a magical artifact couldn't make it mysterious. His reflection reached into its pocket. His real pocket felt warm. He reached in and pulled out the Philosopher's Stone. He held it in his hand. It was smaller than he'd expected, red, smooth, faceted, with the specific quality of something very old that had been made with great skill and great purpose. He could feel the magic in it, thick and accumulated, centuries of it. The weight of all that was in it, all that Flamel had put into it, all that immortality implied, was palpable. Percy looked at it. Then at Harry. What do we do with it? Harry closed his fist around it. He thought about giving it to Dumbledore, which was the obvious answer. He thought about what Dumbledore would do with it, keep it, use it as leverage, continue to cultivate Nicholas Flamel's goodwill. He thought about what the stone represented, immortality, the refusal to let go, the attempt to cheat the thing that everything alive eventually had to do. He thought about Voldemort. About 50 years of soul damage and Horcruxes, he'd read about those too, in the restricted section, with Hermione's help and a specific academic purpose that McGonagall had signed off on without knowing the specific books they'd found, about what a man looks like when he has sacrificed everything human about himself in pursuit of permanent existence. About the face on the back of Quirrell's head. Flamel needs to be told, Harry said. He needs to decide. That's going to require talking to Dumbledore, Hermione said. Yes, Harry said. Are you okay with that? Harry considered the question. He thought about Dumbledore's plan, about the 9 years of it, about the conspicuous absence tonight that was absolutely a choice and absolutely had a shape. He thought about the nod across the great hall at the sorting feast, the ICU. He thought about whether Dumbledore was his enemy. He's not the enemy, Harry said. He's a person who cares about winning a war and is willing to use whatever tools are available. That includes me. He looked at the stone in his fist. I'd rather be a partner than a tool. I think he's capable of understanding the difference. He paused. Eventually. Hermione let out a breath. That's a very mature position. I'm furious about it, Harry said. I'm just also right. Percy laughed, short, genuine, the laugh he did when Harry said something that landed exactly. The sound of it in the underground chamber was so ordinary and so warm that Hermione laughed too, briefly, the tension breaking around the laugh the way ice breaks around a pressure point. Harry pocketed the stone and turned toward the way they'd come. Dumbledore was in the corridor above the trapdoor when they came back up through it. He was standing in the third-floor corridor with his hands clasped and his face doing the complicated, honest thing it did when it wasn't performing anything. He looked at Harry and took in all of it, the three of them whole and unharmed, the absence of quarrel, the specific quality of Harry's expression, in the way of someone who had been preparing for several possible outcomes and was locating which one had occurred. Harry reached into his pocket and held out the stone. Dumbledore looked at it. He didn't take it immediately. He looked at Harry first. "Are you all right?" "Yes," Harry said. "Quirrell, dead," Harry said. "Voldemort took too much from him. There wasn't enough left when Voldemort left." He kept his hand extended, the stone in his palm. "I want to speak with Nicholas Flamel before any decision is made about this. I think he should be the one to decide what happens to it." Dumbledore looked at the stone for a long moment. Then he looked at Harry with those blue eyes that were doing a great deal of quiet work. "You handled this very differently from how I expected," he said. "I know," Harry said. "I handled it my way." "Yes." Dumbledore reached out and took the stone, and something settled in his expression, not relief exactly, more like a revision. The kind a very intelligent person makes when the evidence requires the model to change. "I owe you an honest conversation." "Several," Harry said. The corner of Dumbledore's mouth moved. "Several," he agreed. He looked at Percy, then at Hermione, then back at Harry. "Tomorrow. In my office. All three of you, if you'd like." "We'll be there," Hermione said, with the precision of someone booking an appointment. Dumbledore looked at her. Something moved through his expression that was genuinely warm, the specific warmth of a person recognizing someone who is going to make things considerably more interesting. "Miss Granger," he said. "I suspect you'll have questions." "I have 17, Hermione said. "I wrote them down." "Of course you did," Dumbledore said, not unkindly. He looked at Harry one more time. The complicated blue eyes behind the half-moon spectacles did the quiet work. "Your mother would have done exactly what you did tonight," he said. "Not the power, the thinking. The refusal to be swept along by other people's narratives." He paused. "James would have been more impulsive." "I have both of them," Harry said. "And I have other things too." "Yes," Dumbledore said. "You do." He turned toward the corridor. "Go to bed, all three of you. Tomorrow." They went up through the castle. The corridors were quiet, the stones warm with the specific warmth of a building that has been holding something and has now released it, the way a held breath releases. Hermione peeled off at the entrance to the dormitory stairs with a brief, fierce, slightly surprised by itself hug that Harry received and returned without comment. Neville was awake when they got to the dormitory, sitting in the chair by the window with a book, because Neville had a specific kind of quiet loyalty that expressed itself in waiting up, and he looked at both of them and said, "Everything okay?" And when Harry said, "Yes," Neville simply nodded and went back to his book. Harry climbed to his bunk. The compass was on the small shelf by the bed. The needle was still pointing down, it had pointed all year, toward the thing in the stone below. Now it rotated slowly, finding its new bearing. It settled. It pointed, Harry tilted it, checked the angle, roughly southwest. New York. He thought about that. He thought about the kitchen table and the cookies and Sally's handwriting. He thought about Voldemort's face. About the red eyes and the whisper. "You burn like the sea burns. Cold and complete. Without malice." He didn't feel cold. He felt tired, the specific tiredness of something resolved that had been unresolved for a long time. He felt the specific weight of an 11-year-old who had stood in a chamber with the ghost of the man who'd killed his parents and looked him in the eye without flinching and told him no, clearly, with full knowledge of what no meant. He felt, underneath the tiredness, something clean. "Percy," he said quietly. Percy was already in his bunk. "Yeah. When we go back to New York, Yes, Percy said immediately. I didn't finish the sentence. You were going to say when we go back to New York you want to go back to camp for the rest of summer and train. Harry was quiet for a moment. Yes. But also, can we do the cookies thing again? The midnight cookies. A pause. Then Percy said, we can do that any time you want. Not because anything's wrong. Just because I want to. I know, Percy said. Yeah. We can do that. Harry looked at the ceiling of the dormitory. The canopy above his bunk. The ordinary, quiet, inhabited dark of a room where 3 other people were sleeping or nearly sleeping, all of them existing in the same space, all of them there. He thought about the mirror. The kitchen table. The thing his heart desired with such uncomplicated clarity that a magical artifact could read it like large print. Not power. Not revenge. Not the parents he'd never known or the life he'd been supposed to have. Just the table. Just the people around it. He had that. He had it right now, in the form of a dormitory and a brother in the bunk below and a girl who'd had 17 questions prepared and a boy who'd waited up without being asked to and a god who left compasses as Christmas presents without notes. The sea remembers everything, Poseidon had told him once, sitting at the kitchen table with his tea. Every ship that ever sailed it. Everything it ever held. Every person who ever put their hand in the water and felt the world answer back. It doesn't forget. It keeps everything. Harry closed his eyes. The hum was there, deep and steady, the way it had always been there, even in the bathtub at number 4, even in the worst of it. Especially then. The thing in the water that had known him before he knew himself. It kept everything. Good, Harry thought at it. Keep this too. He slept. Chapter 6, Both Shores. The meeting with Dumbledore lasted 3 hours. Hermione used 14 of her 17 questions. The other 3 she held back, Harry suspected, not because she'd run out of momentum but because she'd identified them as questions that needed more information before she could properly evaluate the answers, and Hermione Granger did not waste good questions on insufficient foundations. Dumbledore's office was everything his reputation suggested, circular, full of quietly whirring instruments that did nothing obviously useful, portraits of previous headmasters sleeping or pretending to sleep with the specific quality of people who are listening very carefully. Fawkes the Phoenix was on his perch in the corner, burning with the low, banked warmth of something that has died and returned enough times to be comfortable with the cycle. Harry sat across from Dumbledore and let Hermione run the interrogation for the first hour because she was better at it and because it gave Harry time to watch Dumbledore respond, to see where he was honest, where he was careful, where the two overlapped and where they didn't. Dumbledore was mostly honest. That was the difficult thing. He didn't perform honesty the way some people did, making a show of revelation that was actually controlled disclosure. He was genuinely transparent about his reasoning, including the parts of his reasoning that didn't reflect well on him, and he was transparent in the specific way of someone who believes that the truth, presented clearly, will justify the choices, which was itself a kind of blind spot, Harry thought, because it assumed the person on the receiving end of the truth would agree that the choices were justified once they understood them. You left the stone at the school, Harry said, when Hermione paused for breath, knowing Voldemort would come for it. Yes, Dumbledore said. You were absent the night he came. I received a letter that, I now believe, was manufactured to draw me away, Dumbledore said. I suspected that was possible before I left. I chose to go anyway. Because you wanted to see what would happen, Harry said. Dumbledore looked at him over the half-moon spectacles. Because I believed that you were ready, and that the encounter would be necessary, and that being present would remove the opportunity for you to demonstrate what you're capable of. He paused. I will not pretend it was uncomplicated. I made a calculation. A child was involved in that calculation, which makes the calculus uncomfortable regardless of the outcome. But you'd make the same calculation again, Harry said. Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. This was a kind of honesty that cost something. I believe I would, he said. And I believe that says something about the limits of my perspective that I should continue to examine. Harry held his gaze. He was looking for the thing underneath the honesty, the shape of what Dumbledore actually wanted from this conversation. He found it. Dumbledore wanted a working relationship. Not the tool and wielder dynamic he'd been planning around for 9 years, but something revised, something that acknowledged what Harry was and still pointed toward what Dumbledore needed. He was smart enough to know the original plan wouldn't work anymore. He was smart enough, Harry thought, to work with the new one. The Horcruxes, Harry said. The room temperature didn't change. Dumbledore's expression didn't change. But something in the quality of the air shifted, the way it shifts in a conversation when someone names the thing that everyone was building toward. The portraits on the walls all simultaneously became more awake. You know about those, Dumbledore said. Hermione found the reference in the restricted section, Harry said. I understood what it meant. Voldemort split his soul. Possibly multiple times. That's why he couldn't die in the usual way, killing the body didn't kill him. He watched Dumbledore's face. How many? Dumbledore looked at Harry for a long moment. The assessment behind those blue eyes was doing something specific, calculating not what Harry could handle, because Harry had demonstrated that calculation was unnecessary, but how much information was useful versus how much was a burden without sufficient context. I believe 7 was his intention, Dumbledore said. Which would mean 6 objects, plus the piece of soul that remains in his body. I have confirmed 2. I suspect several others. He paused. There is also the matter of the night your parents died. When the killing curse rebounded, he stopped. Chose carefully. There is a possibility that a fragment of his soul attached itself to the only living thing in the room. The room was very still. Me, Harry said. I am not certain, Dumbledore said. But I believe it possible. Perhaps probable. Hermione had gone very still beside Harry. Percy, on Harry's other side, had not changed his posture but his expression had shifted to the specific focused quality of someone who is processing information with extreme care before deciding how to respond to it. Harry sat with it. He thought about the connection he'd felt in the final chamber, not with Quirrell, with Voldemort. The red eyes and the whisper. The way Voldemort had looked at him with something that was almost recognition, the kind you don't have for a stranger. He thought about the dreams he'd been having all year, the ones he hadn't told anyone, green light, a corridor, a high cold laugh, the specific quality of looking through someone else's eyes. He thought about the burning contact when he'd touched Quirrell. Both forces together. The ocean that does not accommodate things that have no right to be in it. He thought about what he was. If there's a fragment of Voldemort's soul in me, Harry said slowly, then when I expelled him from Quirrell last night, I would have felt it. Dumbledore's eyebrows moved. Would you? Something foreign, Harry said. The ocean doesn't, things that don't belong in it. There's a sense of it. Like a current that goes the wrong direction. He put his hand on his scar. It didn't burn. It hadn't burned since last night. I felt something leave. I thought it was Voldemort leaving Quirrell. But there were 2 things. There was the larger thing, him, and there was something smaller. Attached differently. Dumbledore was very still. I think it left, Harry said. I think when I pushed him out, it came too. He looked at his hand, the one that had held Quirrell's arm, the one that had felt the contact and the burning and the 2 forces together doing something that wasn't addition. I think Poseidon's blood evicted it. The room breathed. Dumbledore set down his tea. He looked at Harry with the blue eyes that were doing the most complex work Harry had ever seen them do. If that is true, Dumbledore said carefully, it changes the shape of the war considerably. How? Hermione said, because she was always going to ask the next question. The prophecy speaks of a power the Dark Lord knows not, Dumbledore said. I spent years believing that power was love, specifically the love manifest in Lily's sacrifice. And that was real. But love, in the magical sense, requires a vessel. It requires a person who chooses it. He looked at Harry. What you carry is different. It's not a choice. It's a nature. The ocean doesn't choose to be the ocean. He paused. Tom Riddle never encountered a nature he couldn't eventually understand, catalog, and find a counter for. But you cannot counter the ocean. You can only get out of it. He'll try anyway, Harry said. Yes, Dumbledore agreed. He'll try anyway. That's the nature of Tom Riddle. He encounters an impossible obstacle and treats it as a failure of method rather than a limit of possibility. Something moved through his expression, something that was grief, Harry thought, the specific grief of a person who taught someone once and watched them choose the worst version of themselves. I have known him since he was 11 years old. He was extraordinary, and he is the most frightening thing I have ever made. The word made landed with weight. Dumbledore felt it. He didn't take it back. The Horcruxes, Percy said. He'd been quiet for a while, which meant he'd been building to something. The other ones. The confirmed ones and the suspected ones. What are we looking at? Dumbledore looked at Percy with the expression of someone who has been recalibrating his assessment of a person over the course of a conversation and has landed somewhere considerably higher than he started. A diary. Destroyed, I believe, though the circumstances are not yet clear to me, that will require further investigation. A ring, which I know the location of. I have theories about the others, a locket, a cup, a diadem, something living. He paused. The last is the most troubling. Something living, Harry said. An animal. A snake, I believe, Dumbledore said. Tom always had an affinity. Harry thought about a large snake made into a container for a splinter of a dark wizard's soul and filed it under problems that require specific preparation. I'm coming back, Harry said. Next year. And every year after. I need access to your library, the full library, restricted section included. I need direct communication about what you know and what you suspect. I need to not be managed. He held Dumbledore's gaze. In exchange, I'll tell you what I find. I'll work with you rather than around you when it's practical. I won't shut you out. Dumbledore looked at him for a long time. You're negotiating, he said. Yes, Harry said. You're 11. I'm the subject of the prophecy and the son of a god, and I expelled Voldemort from a human host last night, Harry said. My age is a detail. Something genuine moved across Dumbledore's face. Not surprise, past that now, something else, the look of a person finding, unexpectedly and late, the thing they'd hoped for but stopped believing in. He reached across the desk and extended his hand. Harry shook it. Partners, Dumbledore said. Partners, Harry said. With conditions. All the best partnerships have conditions, Dumbledore said, and the corner of his mouth moved in the way that suggested that somewhere underneath the headmaster there was a person who had not entirely lost his sense of the absurd. They left the office an hour later. The corridor outside was bright with late morning, the castle full of the end-of-term energy of students freed from exams and pointed toward summer. Hermione walked with her list and crossed off 14 questions with a pen she produced from her robes and added 3 new ones in a margin. Percy walked with his hands in his pockets. Harry walked and felt the castle around him, the stone, the water in the walls, the specific inhabited warmth of a place that had decided he belonged in it. Are you okay? Percy said. Just that. No performance, no hedging. Yes, Harry said. And then, because Percy had earned honesty that cost something, I think I had a piece of Voldemort in me all year. I know, Percy said. Harry looked at him sharply. You knew? I suspected, Percy said. He paused, finding words. At camp, there are creatures that get parasitized. Not the same as what you had, but the principle. Something foreign that shares your space. You dream differently when it's there. You talked in your sleep sometimes. In Parseltongue. Harry stared at him. You didn't tell me. I didn't know how to tell you, Percy said. And also, I watched it. All year. The things you thought, the choices you made. The way you handled Quirrell, Dumbledore, all of it. None of it felt wrong. The piece of him that was in you was dormant, I think. Buried under too much of you to do anything. He looked at Harry with the sea-colored eyes that were his own in a different face. There wasn't room for it. You're too much yourself. Harry processed this. He thought about being too much yourself as a defense against spiritual parasitism and found it, all things considered, a better outcome than most alternatives. Parseltongue, he said. Yeah. That might be gone now. Might be, Percy said. Does that bother you? Harry thought about it honestly. I don't know yet, he said. I'll find out. He looked up at the corridor ceiling. I have a lot of things to find out. Same, Percy said. I've got a quest coming. Harry looked at him sharply. What quest? Percy's expression did the thing it did when he was not quite sure how to present information. Zeus's master lightning bolt has gone missing, he said. Stolen. And the suspicion, the working divine theory, is that Poseidon's son did it. Harry stopped walking. Hermione stopped too, because Hermione had excellent peripheral awareness. They think you stole it. Or you, Percy said. You weren't on their radar when the theory started, but now that Poseidon's claimed both of us, he shrugged, the careful shrug of someone who is not as unconcerned as they're performing. We're both in the frame. We didn't steal it, Harry said. I know that, Percy said. Zeus doesn't know that. Poseidon doesn't think we did it, but he can't prove it. And the deadline is the summer solstice. He looked at Harry. Which is in 3 weeks, Hermione said, because she always knew. 3 weeks, Percy confirmed. Chiron thinks I need to go find it. Go on a quest, figure out who actually took it, return it before the solstice, or the gods go to war. He said the last part with the particular tone of someone who has grown up with the knowledge that the gods going to war is a specific and catastrophic thing, not a metaphor. Harry stood in the Hogwarts corridor in the late morning of the last week of term and held his brother's gaze. The castle breathed around them. Through the windows at the end of the corridor, Scotland was green and enormous, and the sky was the pale blue of a day that hadn't decided yet what kind of day it was going to be. I'm coming, Harry said. Percy looked at him. You just finished a year at Hogwarts where you expelled a dark wizard from a professor's head. Yes, Harry said. And you're about to walk into a divine political crisis that ends in Olympian warfare if you get it wrong. You need me. I was going to bring Grover, Percy said. Bring Grover and bring me, Harry said. Percy was quiet for a moment. He was doing the calculation, the risk assessment, the strategic value, the argument he could make to Chiron. But underneath the calculation Harry could see the other thing, the simpler thing, the thing that Percy had carried since the night in the kitchen with the blue cookies, and we've got a lot of catching up to do. Okay, Percy said. Obviously I'm coming too, Hermione said. Percy looked at her. It'll be dangerous. I've been dangerously present all year, Hermione said, with the precision of someone establishing a precedent. I'm not stopping now. Percy looked at Harry. Harry looked at Percy. The identical motion, the mirror not mirror of it. Percy spread his hands in the specific gesture of I have no counter-argument and am choosing to move forward. Fine, Percy said. But I'm leading the quest. You lead, I navigate, Harry said. That's the same thing, Percy said. It really isn't, Harry said. They were still arguing about it when they reached the Great Hall for lunch, and Neville looked up from his soup and said, What are you two on about? And Ron said, "Are they always like this?" And Hermione said, "Yes, completely, you'll get used to it," and sat down and opened her notes. The last week of term moved fast and slow simultaneously, the way time does when you're waiting for something. Harry went back to the dormitory the night before departure and packed the things he'd accumulated over the year into the trunk Sally had sent in September. Books, his own and borrowed, and the ones Hermione had pressed on him with the specific intensity of someone sharing something important. The compass, which still pointed southwest. The letter from McGonagall about his mother, kept separately in an inside pocket. The Holly and Phoenix feather wand. A small jar of the Long Island Sound water he'd collected their first morning at camp, which Percy had laughed at and Harry had kept anyway. He packed slowly, the way you pack when you want to remember the room. He looked at the dormitory with its 5 beds and its Gryffindor colors, its window looking out over the grounds, the whomping willow visible in the distance like a biological argument, the lake beyond it dark and living and full of depth. He felt the castle's weight around him one more time. The water in the walls. The way it had answered him all year, shown him the corridors, told him where things were and what they were. The castle was old and full of magic, and it had decided, somewhere around week 2, that Harry Jackson belonged in it, and he had felt that decision like a second home clicking into place. He was leaving and he was coming back. Both were true simultaneously. Neville appeared in the doorway of the dormitory with a plant under his arm. He almost always had a plant under his arm, which Harry had stopped finding unusual around November. "You ready?" "Nearly," Harry said. "Good year," Neville said, with the quiet authority of someone who says things plainly because he has not yet learned to dress them up. Harry looked at him. "Yeah," he said. "Good year." Neville nodded, satisfied, and went back to his plant. The train home was a different creature from the train north. Easier, louder, the compressed excitement of 400 students heading toward summer. Their compartment filled with the same architecture as before, the twins, Ron, Hermione, Neville, building around Harry and Percy with the comfortable familiarity of a configuration that had proven it worked. Hermione distributed reading material to everyone, which everyone accepted in varying states of willingness. Fred and George had something that looked like a catalog for a joke shop they were apparently planning to open, which Hermione looked at with the expression of someone who is professionally disapproving and personally curious. Ron had a box of sweets from the trolley. Neville had a letter from his grandmother. Percy had his eyes closed, the ring on his hand, the camp-trained quality of someone conserving energy before a mission. Harry looked out the window at Britain going past, hills and fields and the specific green of the English countryside that he'd grown up thinking was the only landscape there was, before he understood there was an ocean and a city and a place by a reservoir where the mornings belonged to them. He thought about both shores. The wizarding world on one side, Hogwarts and Diagon Alley and McGonagall's letter and Dumbledore's blue eyes and a prophecy that had pointed at him since before he was born. The Greek world on the other side, Camp and Chiron and Clarice and the Long Island Sound and a training ground where he'd learned that the water was his and he was the water's. He didn't feel divided between them. That was the thing he hadn't expected. The two worlds didn't compete for him, didn't create a split that required a choice. They were both his, both completely, the way the ocean is both surface and depth without one diminishing the other. He was Harry Potter's heir and Poseidon's son, Lily's boy and Sally's, Percy's twin and his own person, the subject of one prophecy and already becoming the answer to another. He was all of it. All at once. He was not going to pretend to be less than that for anyone. "Hey," Percy said, not opening his eyes. "Stop thinking so loudly." "I'm not thinking loudly," Harry said. "You do this thing when you're processing something big, you go very still and the air does something," Percy said. "You've been doing it for 20 minutes. What does the air do?" "Gets heavier," Percy said. "Like before rain." He finally opened his eyes and looked at Harry with the direct, practical attention that was his default. "What are you thinking about?" Harry thought about how to answer that. He settled on the honest one. "Both," he said. Percy understood that immediately, the twins' vocabulary, the short form of things. Yeah, he said. Me too. Are you nervous? About the quest? No, Percy said, in the flat way that meant yes, but in the way that's useful rather than the way that's not. I'm ready. Different thing. I know, Harry said. Me too. The train pulled into King's Cross at 5 in the afternoon. The platform was chaos, parents and owls and trunks and the specific noise of a school year being officially over. Harry moved through it with Percy beside him and Hermione behind them, emerging through the barrier into the ordinary Muggle side of the station, and there was Sally. She was standing near the barriers in a green coat with her hair pulled back and a coffee in one hand, and she was watching the barriers with the specific quality of someone who has not been anxious but has been very attentive, and when she saw them she didn't run. She just moved, direct and certain, closing the distance in the way she did everything, without fuss, without performance, with the complete, uncomplicated intention of someone who knows exactly what they're doing and why. She wrapped her arms around both of them simultaneously, which required a width of embrace that she somehow managed, and held on. Harry let himself be held. He stood in the middle of King's Cross with his school trunk on one side and his brother on the other and Sally Jackson's arms around both of them, and the compass in his pocket and the wand at his side and the stone's absence a clean space where something complicated had been, and he stood there and let the moment be what it was. Enormous. Ordinary. His. How was it? Sally said into the top of his head, which was the only part of him she could reach comfortably. Good, Harry said. Eventful. Eventful, she said, with the exact tone that meant I want the full story and we are going to talk about this extensively over dinner. There's a quest, Percy said into her shoulder. Starting next week. We need to go to the West Coast. Sally pulled back and looked at them. Both of them. The measured, complete look of a woman who has been parenting a demigod for 11 years and has developed specific tools for assessing the scale of incoming information. Both of you? And Hermione, Percy said. Sally looked at Hermione. Hermione, who had been standing a respectful distance back, came forward and extended her hand. Hermione Granger. I've read extensively about Greek mythology and I have a working plan. Sally shook her hand. She looked at Hermione for a long moment. Then she looked at Harry. Is the plan good? It's a starting plan, Harry said. We'll adjust. Naturally, Sally said. She picked up Percy's trunk because Percy had already gone ahead to flag a taxi, and then she looked at Harry and said, Leave yours, and when Harry opened his mouth she said, Percy will come back for it. You walk with me. He walked with her through the station. It was busy, the ordinary crowd of a Tuesday afternoon in London, and Sally matched his pace without comment, the coffee in her other hand now, and after a moment she said, I got your letters. All of them? All of them. Including the one about Quirrell, which you very carefully wrote in a way that told me exactly what was happening without saying anything specific, which, she paused. I want to be clear about something. Harry looked at her. You can tell me things directly, she said. I know you're capable of handling things. I know you don't need, you're not someone who needs to be protected from information or shielded from reality. I know that. She looked at him sideways. But I'm your mother, Harry. In the way that matters. And that means I want to know. Not to help you fix things. Just to know. Just to be, she stopped. In it with you. Do you understand the difference? Harry held that. He thought about the note on the kitchen counter, everything means everything. He thought about the first morning, standing in the kitchen with the bagel, understanding for the first time that there was a different kind of place than the kind he'd been given. Yes, he said. I understand. Good, she said. So tell me. All of it. He told her all of it. He told her about Quirrell and the mirror and Voldemort's face on the back of Quirrell's head and the chamber and the stone and Dumbledore waiting in the corridor. He told her about the Horcruxes and what Dumbledore had said and what he suspected about the soul fragment and the way it had felt when it left. He told her about the compass pointing down all year and the Quidditch match and the broom and the troll and Hermione and the chessboard and Hermione's 17 questions and the handshake and partners with conditions. She listened to all of it without interrupting, the coffee cooling in her hand, the station thinning around them as they moved toward the exit. When he finished she was quiet for a moment. "The soul fragment," she said. "If it's really gone, I think it is," Harry said. "I felt it go. Does that feel different? Inside?" Harry thought about this carefully. He inventoried himself the way he inventoried his physical state in the mornings, searching for something that had been there and wasn't. "Less," he said, and then more precisely, "not less like something's been taken. Less like something's been put down. Like I've been carrying a bag I didn't know I was carrying and now I'm not." Sally nodded slowly. "And the connection to Voldemort?" "I don't know yet," Harry said. "Some of it might still be there, the prophecy ties us whether or not his soul piece does. But the dreams have stopped. The green light thing." "Good," Sally said, with a quiet fierceness. They came out of King's Cross into the London afternoon, Percy already at the curb with a taxi and Hermione beside him with both trunks loaded with the efficient precision of someone who does not wait for things to happen when she could be making them happen. Percy looked up and made a face at Harry that was specifically, "I tried to carry both trunks myself and she wouldn't let me." Harry made a face back that was predictable. Sally stood at the taxi door and looked at her sons, both of them, the original and the returned, the one she'd raised from birth and the one the ocean had sent back to her, standing on a London pavement in the afternoon light, dark-haired and sea-eyed and already turned toward whatever came next. She looked at them the way she sometimes did, the way Harry had learned to let himself be looked at without flinching, the look that was just love, uncomplicated, specific to them, not contingent on anything they'd done or were going to do. Then she got in the taxi, because she was not a person who lingered in doorways, and Percy got in after her, and Hermione got in after Percy, and Harry stood on the pavement for one more moment looking at London and thinking about New York and thinking about Long Island and thinking about the quest in 3 weeks and the school year in September and Voldemort somewhere out there, diminished and determined, and the Horcruxes and Dumbledore and the wizarding world that was his by birth and the Greek world that was his by blood and the 2 prophecies that pointed at the same boy from different directions. He thought about standing in a chamber and looking at a dark lord with red eyes and telling him no. He thought about Percy on the back of a mountain troll. He thought about Hermione with 17 questions and Neville who waited up. He thought about the compass pointing home. He got in the taxi. "Camp in 3 weeks, Percy said, leaning over. "Then the quest. Then back to Hogwarts in September." "That's a busy summer," Harry said. "Every summer is busy," Percy said. "That's just how we work." "That's just how we work," Harry agreed. The taxi pulled into London traffic, and the city moved around them, and through the window Harry caught a flash of the Thames, grey-brown and wide and ancient, connected as all water was connected to every ocean on Earth, connected specifically to the pipes at number 4, Privet Drive, and to the reservoir in Central Park, and to the Long Island Sound, and to the deep and dark and living thing that had found him at the bottom of a bathtub when he was 7 years old and said, "There you are." With the voice of something that had been looking for a very long time. He felt it in the flash of river, the hum, the greeting, the "you are where you're supposed to be." He turned away from the window and talked to his brother. Behind them, London did what London did, carried on, moved, remembered nothing, forgot nothing, held its river and let the river run. Ahead of them, New York waited with its city noise and its camp on the island and the quest taking shape in the space between the solstice and the present. Ahead of them, Hogwarts waited in Scotland with its water in the walls and its compass-worthy stone and its old man with blue eyes who had finally, after 11 years, met the boy the prophecy was about and found that the boy had his own plans. Both shores. Both worlds. All of it. Harry leaned his head back against the taxi seat and let the city pass and felt, not the absence of difficulty, not the absence of what was coming, not the absence of dark wizards and divine politics and the long complicated work of dismantling a Dark Lord's immortality piece by piece, but underneath all of it, load-bearing, true, the hum. Present. Constant. His. I know, he said back to it, the way you say things you've always known but are finally saying out loud. The river flashed once more between buildings. The taxi drove on.